trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a number of, a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, we died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee, Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not a thing. The Russian bots started taking out. Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should be running.
This is not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because of the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence, a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean...
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, welcome to episode 84, appropriately titled the 1984 kind of subtlety noted. But there's been so much going on, starting with what's going on, the current rift in MAGA over the HB1 visas. And, you know, you love to see it. I just been scrolling through Twitter and just looking at people kind of arguing about it. And it does kind of expose, I think, someone like an Elon Musk, who I think I've kind of, I've been deferential to because I feel like he provided a counterweight to the mainstream narrative in the last election cycle. And I give him credit for that. But that doesn't mean that I don't, criticize him or trust him completely. I think that it's just good to see these kind of lively debates where you have, but then also the fact that he pulled Laura Loomer off Twitter. I don't know that he pulled her off completely, but kind of like stripped her of her credentials on Twitter is, you kind of see the true colors of these people coming out a little bit with that kind of stuff. And so with that, I thought it would be a worthwhile exercise to review the year of 2024, because just going back through my own broadcasts here and looking at the stuff that I talked about throughout the year, it's just things happen so fast. There's so much news going on. There's so many different, in the culture we live in today with the way that the internet is, it's just difficult to keep up with everything. And I mean, think about a world where we didn't keep up with everything. 100 years ago, we didn't have the internet, so we weren't trying to keep up with all this stuff. So it's really just a revisiting of propaganda narratives over the past year, I think, and just even also a couple things that I kind of touched on myself. So we're gonna start by going all the way back to January of 2024 here. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the Iowa Caucuses back in January. So this is kind of a take that I had on the Iowa Caucuses back at that time. And this particular episode was broadcast on January 11th of 2024. So let's watch a little bit of this and just talk about it here. Pop this up. This is going to be a little clunky. I'm kind of freestyling here, so forgive me, but I think it's like I said, this is a worthwhile exercise.
But several years ago, there was an Iowa caucus, and there was a little bit of an incident that occurred during the Iowa caucuses. And I want to start with this piece I found from The Economist, which talks about how the Iowa caucuses are changing in 2024. 5 decades of tradition have been overturned by the Democrats. That's how much they care about democracy. So The Economist is paywalled, but I did get a little chunk of this article that I'm going to read you real quick. A saying in Iowa has it that a candidate has to shake a voter's hand 7 times to win their support. Those competing in the 2024 Republican primaries have little time left for hand clasping. On January 15th, registered Republican voters in the Hawkeye state will launch America's primary season, picking the candidate they want to represent the party in the presidential election in November. Iowans have an unusual way of choosing. Since the 1970s, voters have gathered in town halls, school gymnasiums, and church basements to make their selection, a process known as caucusing. But this year, for the first time, Democrats will choose by mail-in ballot over several weeks. Interesting. They won't be caucusing. And you know why that is, right? Because a caucus you can see the results of. You can't fudge a caucus vote because there are people standing there that represent the voters. So that's why the caucuses are so important, because they're really an So this is just a reminder of what happened in the Iowa caucuses. The Democrats subverted the Iowa caucuses. They kind of bypassed them and started their primary basically in South Carolina. And there's a little bit more in this video I want to touch on. Let's see. I think there's some pieces of where with Vivek here, who's under the spotlight at the moment. Let's jump ahead to this part right here.
I think that's horrifying. But we did have a guest on this show who said that she thought she was a man. She believed the gender ideology she was being fed on the internet. And she talked to, I think she said she talked to her brother.
See, and this is where it gets a little dicey because some of these guys get real conspiratorial, like there's a gender. I want to take a quick aside from this that I'm very passionate about because my grandmother is a lot less bigoted and crazy than people make it out to be.
40 years ago, social media and otherwise playing the loss of purpose, the loss of faith. We can go deeper on that. Yes, there are all kinds of mental health conditions that are rampant in the United States of America today. We should have.
And I'm going to stop there with that. So anyway, the whole point of that was just to show you that, first of all, the idea that democracy is on the ballot is a joke. And second of all, Vivek makes some good points. And I think so. I'm going to jump up right here to some of the cartoonish propaganda that happened back in January. And this is interesting because it's mostly about kind of the October 7th narrative. And I think we've seen a lot of how that's kind of unraveled in the mainstream press in recent days. But guys like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Matei here were on top of this in January of 2024. Listen to a little bit of this and we'll talk about it. In the New York Times, and I didn't clip a whole bunch of this segment, but I want you to see this real quick because they really lay it out. If I have the here it is. Here it is. So real quick before we move into this Max and Aaron clip, I just wanted to read what Nick from RBN said here. Did you guys know that hundreds of Hamas soldiers died during October 7th? You know there was Apache helicopters raining hellfire indiscriminately above during October 7th, which killed many Israelis, by the way. Despite this chaos, mass death, and how dangerous this was for Hamas, Zionists would have you believe that they paused combat in order to commit the mass rape with Apache helicopters and the IDF shooting at them. Who believes this stupid shit? A valid question. And I think, like I said, a lot of this stuff has come unraveled in the mainstream press in recent days. But let's keep I always going. Lose these clips. I need to name them better.
Addressing that after so many debunked Israeli claims, the dozens of beheaded babies, the baby burned in an oven, the baby cut out of a woman's fetus, the fetus cut out of the womb. Now Israel and its supporters are really doubling down on these claims of mass rape by militants on October 7th. And we pointed out a lot of the inconsistencies in those stories, but it persists.
Nick just pointed them out.
The Biden administration has really tried to push it as well. They've made a thing out of it. Hillary Clinton came out and made a thing out of it. CNN, Jake Tapper has tried to make a thing out of it. And now the New York Times has come out with a new story that people who buy into Israeli claims are really promoting, that making the claim that Hamas used sexual violence as a tool of war, that there was a deliberate effort to use sexual violence as a tool of war on October 7th. But once again, people are overlooking the countervailing evidence and the inconsistencies even inside this own story, including the very quiet acknowledgement. And this is what a lot of the story is about. It's basically an elaborate effort to justify the fact that there's no physical evidence.
Yeah.
And also no testimony still.
Yeah, so
that's what the story basically is.
Screams without words
I mean, that's a quote from an eyewitness who actually wasn't an eyewitness. But it's kind of like, we don't have the words, so we're just going to hear the screams anyway by generating enough innuendo to make you believe that this actually took place. And you really have to harbor a lot of academics would call it Orientalist anti-Arab racism to believe that all this was true. I mean, this narrative, it's like the Central Park Five for pantsuit feminists and pussy hat liberals.
Max is such a G. So again, it's January 2024. These guys were way ahead of this in many ways. So applause for the Gray Zone, one of the best, real news outlets there is right now. So I want to jump ahead here to, in this episode, to a little bit of January 6th cringe. And let's see where we got. This is there's actually a clip of this in my intro piece, but let's just watch this because this is again Mate and Taibbi laughing at MSNBC's J6th anniversary coverage. But anyway, watch this. This is absolutely incredible.
This solemn occasion.
So this is
try to get,
since I didn't clip the part where they set it up. This is a guy who I guess worked for the Capitol Police, who wrote a book he's selling about January 6th, appearing on MSNBC with Jonathan Capehart.
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
And don't call me Shirley.
I'm sorry, I didn't set this up properly. So Jonathan Capehart is interviewing a man named Michael Fanone, who was a former DC police officer who was there on January 6th. And just being in Michael Fanone's presence as Michael Fanone is hawking his new book on January 6th, which I'm sure will do well with the MSNBC audience. Jonathan Capehart is reduced to tears. That's how emotional he is over this.
Surely you can't be serious.
Can we watch it like over and over again? That one moment.
One more time. Yeah, why not? Why not?
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this third anniversary.
Thank you for what you did 3 years ago, whatever he did, and now writing a memoir trying to profit off of it as a liberal hero.
So as an addendum to this segment, I want to show you this clip from our next segment, which is about a debate between Steve. Let me move on to the next episode here. That's from episode. Let me see, what episode is that? That's episode 48 on January 11th. So we're going to jump up now to January 23rd and examine some of the top stories from that episode. And just watching a lot of the stuff that's, transpired since the election, it's very interesting to revisit all this stuff because you see, for example, with the Jonathan Capehart clip there, him crying over the J6 thing. It's just such a great example of the levels of propaganda, that these people try to, impose in order to, countervail Trump being elected. And it didn't work. And so it's even better now to watch it in retrospect and just see how ridiculous some of it really was. So this next episode was from January 23rd, and my banner story was called "Sorry, Right-Wingers, Democrats Are Not Communists." And I think I make a really solid case in this episode. I bring receipts as to why the Democrats are not communists. But I'm going to start here about 20 minutes into this episode where it's Roseanne Barr talking to Kash Patel. And this is kind of, where the whole, title comes from, because they're very clearly, wrong about this. So anyway, let's watch this and we'll talk a little bit about it.
It's not.
He's showing Americans that if you free speech advocate for Donald Trump, the FBI is showing up at your doorstep after they unlawfully surveilled you. So all of this is getting out there.
Taibbi.
And also,
Or
don't
the IRS
forget,
with him.
they're showing us too
Listen.
that the people who come and surround our house and threaten us and maybe light it on fire or kill a few of our neighbors in their mobs and gangs, their street gangs, like Hitler had his brown shirts. You know, it's exactly the same.
Again, I played this clip last week of David Frum saying flat out that the quote unquote Antifa people were probably undercover cops. No joke. And the people like Roseanne and Tim Pool think that those are leftists. The people in the black that show up and break windows and stuff, they think those are the left. And that's what she's talking about here. It's ridiculous.
They all get off. They kill a kid and they get 6 months. I mean, that's part of the story too. It's so pre-war Germany, and I'm Jewish.
Again,
And
both sides are just calling each other Nazis. How does our political debate just degenerated to two far right parties? I mean, you cannot argue that Biden isn't far right when you see what's going on in the Middle East. Two far right parties calling each other Nazis. That's American politics right now.
I grew up with survival.
So gonna pause there for just a minute and turn my camera back on. By the way, if my camera, I'm shutting my camera off because I'm kind of like dual streaming here. So, I'm trying to save bandwidth as a side note. But the whole point of this episode was, hey, look, if you think the Democrats are communists, you're a moron. I was, of course, that idea was, of course, really pounded home right before the election when the Democrats started campaigning with Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and touting the endorsements of people like John Bolton. And you saw the Robert Kagan resign from the Washington Post because they wouldn't endorse Kamala Harris. I mean, all this stuff that I said at the beginning of the year about how the Democrats are right-wing neocons just completely bore out in the reality of the dialogue as the election got closer. So another thing I did in this episode that I thought was pretty great was I took a shot at Joy Reid as the real Joy Shady. And let me just play you a little bit of this because I think this is top tier. Haircut here. So she got into a bout with one of the Liberty moms about book banning. And the reality is, I think that she's drastically overcompensating for something that happened a while back. But let's just watch this real quick. Just to refresh your memory. I'm sure you've seen
other Moms for Liberty advocates have to decide that an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue isn't appropriate for students to read. What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family.
Joy, let me start this over. What expertise do you have to say that it is good reading for a curriculum in a public school? That you have and other Moms for Liberty advocates have. Now, I just want to pause here for a second and clarify what's going on, because what the debate here is about, kind of like a book about a child who was molested and grew up gay being in a school library. They're not advocating that the book be banned entirely. What they're advocating for is whether or not that should be in a public school library for children. And I think that's a valid concern. I would have to examine the details. I've never seen the book myself, so I'm not taking sides here. But the whole point of this was just to highlight how ridiculous the debate has become for people like Joy Reid. But let's keep going here. To decide that an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue isn't appropriate for students to read. What is your expertise? What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. So you have incest, rape, pedophilia. Joy, you said you'd let me answer, so I'm going to answer for you. In what context is a strap-on dildo acceptable for public school? That's my question to you. Tell me what the context around the strap-on dildo or the rape of a minor child by a teacher. Hold on a second. No, wait, we're talking about public school. One moment. All right. So now you've asked me questions. Sure. I'm going to answer it. Okay. Well, who is the main character? What's the name of the main
I just can't get over her
character
hair.
in All Boys?
It looks like Eminem hair.
Blue.
You're asking me right now.
You
to
just gave me
name-
very specific information about this book, so you're presenting yourself as somebody expert.
It's the gentleman.
Hold on.
The main,
Who's the main character in the book?
the main character is the author.
What's his name?
George.
So here's what thinking people would call a straw man argument, that you don't know the main character's name, so you
believe is his first
because
name?
you're giving me very specific information that is.
You're asking me to remember the name of an author.
You
the
just
name of the
remembered
author
very
doesn't
specific names.
joy.
Here's my
We're
question.
talking about
Here's my
You
question.
didn't answer my question.
No. I'm going to answer. Your
Great.
question.
I would love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know that.
So anyway, I just wanted to drive this point home that I think Joy Shady here is overcompensating for something that happened a couple years ago. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but they found a bunch of anti-gay posts on her blog, and she claimed that Russian hackers did it. And this article is great for a couple of reasons, but let me just read these snippets to you so you can get on to a much better story, which is I won't even spoil it for you. Anyway, short history of blaming hackers for pretty much everything. Joy Reid may have very well been the target of a malicious breach, or she's just the latest person to blame hackers for her past mistakes. It's interesting the level of awareness that Wired has around fake hacking claims when it comes to this, but not when it comes to, like the DNC, for example. Anyway, check this out. The report on the Reid, but let's start with Reid, who claims that attackers not only breached her blog, but also the nonprofit Internet Archive, which maintains the Wayback Machine, a database that automatically preserves millions of web pages to keep them from being lost to history. They did so, Reid says, to insert multiple posts that say things like adult gay men tend to be attracted to very young post-pubescent types. So just to clarify here, her argument is that not only did Russian hackers hack her site, but they also hacked the Wayback Machine that archives her posts as well. So that's the real Joy Shady, kind of, as I said in the piece, overcompensating for past anti-gay rhetoric by being like ridiculously pro-gay in this situation on MSNBC. And, Democrats want to ask why they lost the election. It's really stuff like that more than anything that's like way outside the mainstream. No one in their right mind is anti-gay, but having like overly sexualized materials in a children's library is a little ridiculous. And again, it's not, if you're the type of parent, I'm a very open-minded parent. I never tried to hide my children from anything that was gay or anything like that. But if you're that type of person that wants to, teach your kids that stuff, you can do that at home. It doesn't have to be for everybody. So I think that's the point here. Anyway, moving on. There's another great piece in this particular episode where Andrew Sullivan explains to Bill Maher why the Republicans don't like Nikki Haley, and Bill Maher pretty much kind of laughs at him. I think it's maybe right here. So let me show you this real quick, and we'll talk about it.
It's like, I didn't know, really. I thought it was urine. I did it in the dark. And the only thing I'd ever seen come out of there was urine.
I know.
And it seemed like, this doesn't seem right, but...
The fact that you remember that moment, I remember
yes,
that moment
I do.
too, just shows you how natural it is.
And how naive we were compared to kids today, because I'm sure that... Well, who do you think Trump has on his short list for VP?
Okay, this is what I wanted to talk about. So wipe the slate clean on everything.
Oh, Stefanik is the one that was talked about now?
Stefanik.
Isn't that the one that they were talking, she's the New York State, used to be a normal and then became Trump crazy?
And the tormentor of Claudine Gay.
Yes,
That's what
right.
made her
Oh,
famous.
yes.
That's what makes it.
But I think still Haley. I mean, Trump has teamed up. I think he's teamed up with people who've said way worse things. J.D. Vance wrote a whole book and launched his career as.
See, to me, what this conversation kind of lays out is, okay, we're not going to get Trump, but how can we subvert his administration? How can we get someone in there that will do the things we want them to do? His Dick Cheney, if you will. Trump's Dick Cheney will be someone like Elise Stefanik or Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is totally a empty vessel, just like a Biden that can be puppeted to do what she used to be on the board of Boeing. And there's proof that she covered up for, a lot of their shenanigans. So it's interesting to see these liberals talk so fondly of Nikki Haley. I mean, it's not, obviously, because they're all part of the same party and Trump is a threat to that. But anyway.
Backing Trump.
He doesn't care about
He doesn't
that.
care about any of that. And Haley, although there are parts of MAGA, as we discussed, that might not love her, if Trump says this is it.
So this is the core of this right here. And this is so great to watch in retrospect. Remember, this is January of this year. Bill Maher basically says the electorate is too dumb to care that Nikki Haley's a neocon. And Andrew Sullivan here just totally takes him to school. So enjoy.
And he's very practical, and she would help in the suburbs, which is his biggest general election vulnerability. I think there's a lot of the actual numbers people around Trump who are trying to get him to think about that, and it would probably give him several points.
I saw in the paper this week that he is doing better and did better with college education.
Yep.
I remember when he won Iowa or was running in Iowa in 2016, and he had that famous line, "I love the poorly educated."
Yes.
I mean, we can't write this material.
Did he really say that?
You said tonight that it looks like he could get reelected. He definitely could, but he got 3 million fewer votes in 16. He got 7 million fewer votes in 20. And they had bad midterms, and the Democrats have won every state-based special election in the last year. If he's going to win, which he could, he can't run as the 20 or 16 version of him. And the ticket is the first largest way to say to the suburbs, I'm a little different.
The trouble with Nikki is that she made.
I think whoever's advising Trump now must be better. I think Steve Bannon was a good advisor to him, but you saw, like, I just played his victory speech from Iowa where he said, I want to bring everyone together, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. So I think these guys, just like the MSNBC crowd, which Ari Melber is a member of, are wildly misled. They know nothing. They're not experts.
Like the Dalai Lama. I mean, there is not a country she would invade, not a region she wouldn't bomb. She is the most unreconstructed neocon I've ever come across in politics. And Trump's entire message is, I'm not an unreconstructed neocon. I think the basic...
He nails it. Andrew Sullivan nails it right there. That is exactly, and you can see it in this primary. Now listen to Bill Maher's response. This is just so stunningly inaccurate.
You're giving the voters way too much credit. Like, they are looking at neocon versus not. This is not what they're thinking about.
See, Bill Maher is such a relentless C word that he thinks that voters are just stupid, that they don't pay attention to issues like that. And surprise, Bill, they actually do. That's why Trump is winning. That's why the people are ignoring the media.
This is why I get back to the issues with Trump. I think one of the issues that helped him was that people were sick of these wars. And when they have someone that seems like going to get into more wars, they were not going to like it. It's a big issue.
I don't think voters expect the running mate to set foreign policy. Period.
My response to that would have been, hey, do you remember Dick Cheney?
I don't think they think about foreign policy the hell of a lot, except if the one that they care about now is Ukraine, because it's holding up immigration reform. They care about.
See, and that, again, this is Bill Maher. Just he watches MSNBC and listens to media people, and that's what they're saying. That's not what's going on. They're not upset about Ukraine because it's holding up immigration reform. The insurgents in Congress were against Ukraine long before the immigration reform was tied to it, Bill. I'm sorry.
This country, what's going on in this country, just the way most people watch local news. They don't watch national news.
That means they don't want the wars, which Nikki represents. That's their
He's
position
right.
on
Sullivan
politics.
is right.
We don't want to have one, really.
But the median Trump voter doesn't think that he's going to take the cues from her on that.
Or that's.
I don't think Ari's wrong about that sentiment, but he's also missing the.
So it's funny to me because I just wanted to throw in this aside. You listen to the Ari Melbers back in January of this year, and they're like, "Oh, well, Trump's not going to listen to the people around him. Like, the voters are assuming Trump's going to take those people are going to take orders from him. And now the entire media, I'm sure I could find clips of Ari Melber saying they're like, oh, Elon Musk is the real president. He controls everything, and it's like, it's just interesting to see how their viewpoint conveniently shifts as necessary. They're never consistent, which is why, listen to how wrong these guys were about all of this. Ari Melber and Bill Maher, wildly wrong now. And now we have the proof with the election results. But Andrew Sullivan was schooling them right here.
Point. The reason Trump is wildly popular is because he's against the types of things that Nikki Haley stands for. And if he was to pick her as a running mate, it would be a suicide. It would be a suicide move. It would completely tank his campaign, which is, I'm sure, what they want to happen.
Really, the issue they're voting on. Nikki Haley. What is she going to do about Pakistan? I just don't think this is I don't know what to do. All right, I have time for one more. Oh,
you're like, yeah, voters are dumb. Yeah, they're not thinking about that. Rah. Bill Maher knows this.
Bill Maher is insanely smuggerant. So I got one. I'm trying to stick to the meatiest segments in each of these. Otherwise, this stream is going to be like 7 hours long because we're still in January and we're already almost 40 minutes deep here. But let's jump to, there is a point in this where the media basically admitted that they suck in January of 2024. And I thought this was a good story that kind of got lost in the shuffle. I'm pretty sure Jimmy and the Due Dissidence guys covered it. But before that, I had a whole piece about how Obama sucks. But let me just jump up here because I think this is, I'm going to try to stick to the most salient points of it anyway. All right, let's watch this. So this is the media essentially admitting why no one trusts them anymore. This is good stuff right here.
Generally good. So this last clip I'm going to show you, they know.
If you go back really not that long ago, as I say,
a Wall Street Journal reporter basically telling you they know what Glenn just said.
We owned the news. We were the gatekeepers, and we very much owned the facts as well. If it said it in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, then that was a fact. Nowadays, people can go to all sorts of different sources for the news, and they're much more questioning about what we're saying. So it's no longer good enough for us just to say, this is what happened, or this is the news. We have to explain, almost like explain our working. So readers expect to understand how we source stories. They want to know how we go about getting stories. We have to sort of lift the bonnet, as it were, and in a way that newspapers aren't used to doing, and explain to people what we're doing. We need to be much more transparent about how we go about collecting the news.
Lift the bonnet. I like that analogy because it's just is great. It juxtaposes with how outdated the legacy media is in general. And they know it. Just like Glenn said, they've lost all credibility with the public, and they're not the gatekeepers anymore. So again, I'm really happy about
just not to do another victory lap here, but this was January of 2024 where I called it. I was like, hey, no one trusts the media anymore. And, now again, we have the election results in front of us. It wasn't the safest bet to make. I think there was a good chance Kamala could have won despite all the relentless propaganda that was thrown at the public. But inevitably, people listen to their better instincts, or the country's racist. You make the choice. And misogynist. I love that that's always the answer too. I was talking to a friend yesterday who was very upset, a guy I haven't talked to in a long time, who was very upset with, the Trump election results. And, he told me he hates Steve Bannon, but he doesn't know why, because the media taught him to. But it's just funny to hear their take on this stuff. And, he was completely, he's one of the people who bought it all. But despite all that, he thinks people are just racists, you know. And I said to him, why is it that the voters are always at fault for the election results? It's never the political candidates or the consultants or the polls. You know, he and I, when we were teenagers, used to work for a polling organization. And I've told this story before about push polling. We did a poll for the Mormon Church. And in the poll, we were trained to say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You had to read the full name of the LDS Church every time you said it. So by the end of this poll, it was a multiple choice, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, we're saying the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then the final result that they were looking to get was, do you think the Mormon Church is a Christian Church of Jesus Christ? And of course, after you've had that pounded into your head for 20 minutes, most people are like, yeah, I think they are. And so, you know, then the Mormons could take the results of that poll and go out and say, look, America believes that the Mormon Church is a Church of Christ, you know. And that same logic applies to political polling. And you see it, you know, leading up to the election, everyone's like, oh, it's really close. It's razor sharp, you know. And then, of course, you get the actual results and the pollsters are way off because they went in trying to get a result, you know. And then the polls are then used as propaganda to make people think, oh, well, Kamala is going to win anyway, so I shouldn't vote, or, you know, vice versa. I think it probably worked against them in this cycle more than anything if people thought it was close. But anyway, we are now into February of 2024. And this first bit is a good one. And so if you remember, this is around the time Jon Stewart decided to come back to the media, or back to the Daily Show anyway. And the narrative in the press was that that Stewart was too hard on Biden, you know, that he was going so hard on Biden. And what I pointed out at the time was that he is not actually going hard on Biden. He's actually trying to equate Biden's senility to that of Trump. And so anyway, I think I cleverly got around some of this, the copyright stuff, and I'm just going to show you this clip, and we will talk about it. This is from episode number 50, actually, February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2024. So check this out. Showed a bunch of clips of all the Trump kids and Trump saying they don't remember things, you know, just to be like, hey, look, these guys don't remember either. That's what you do in a deposition. You go, oh, I can't recall, I can't remember. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. But then he shows this clip of Biden kind of like shouting down a bunch of reporters and walking away from the podium, and he's like, yeah, good, you got him. Like his responses were valid. And then Biden comes back to the podium, and Jon Stewart's like, no, why'd you do that? And then he kind of like lays into him a little bit. You know, he's very, but again, this is what I want to show you. So after all of this, what he basically does is he goes, here's what the other guy was doing. And he shows this footage of Trump saying something stupid. So I want to just show you this little tidbit. Hopefully I don't get my stream shut off for it, but it's very short. I just want, and it's mostly the clip of Trump. So watch this.
Demanding job. So what was his opponent saying this weekend?
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania.
So that's his evidence that Trump is as equally as demented as Joe Biden is, right? And I thought that was kind of weird, because if you've ever watched Trump, which God forbid, you know, it's not like I sit around watching videos of Trump, but I do this to get clips. So I watch some of his speeches. If you've ever watched a Trump speech, he just rambles incoherently about a bunch of different stuff. He has thoughts running together. The guy stands on stage and talks for like an hour and a half constantly. And so to compare this out of context clip with Joe Biden is totally proof that Stewart is a Biden surrogate, to my mind. And the chorus of people that came out and saying like, oh, Jon Stewart's being too rough on Biden. No, he's not. He's completely covering for him.
So watch this clip of Trump. Here's the full clip of Trump talking about Pennsylvania, just to give you the context. Because it's still stupid. I'm not saying that what he's saying is smart, but it's a far cry from what Biden is. And I'll show you a clip of Biden next. But watch this. This is the full clip of what Trump said.
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania. How about all over the country? They're taking the name of George Washington off high schools and other things. That's one even I thought was safe. Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, their names are now endangered. No, we are going to have to win. You're not going to have a country anymore. You're not going to have a state anymore. You're not going to have anything.
At least that's a coherent point. As stupid and dramatic as it is a coherent point when you show the context. They're not going to have Pennsylvania anymore. They're not going to have it. You know how Trump is. He's like, everything I do is the best thing ever. Yeah, the Democrats are they're gonna come into your house and rape your wives. He'll say stupid crap like that because that's just how he rolls. But it really frustrated me. And as soon as I watched the Jon Stewart take on this, it was pretty evident to me who he's working for. And he's not the down the middle guy I always thought he was. Because he was always good about calling out the Republicans. And he does go a little on Biden, like way more than any of the corporate press does, of course, because they're not even pretending to be not an extension of the government at this point. But he's totally, the rest of the whole thing is him covering for Biden. Like I said, he shows this out of context clip of Trump. So that clip of Trump, now watch this clip of Biden talking about Mitterrand, who is dead.
I was elected. I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. I was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from Germany,
he is totally lost right here. Listen to him.
And said,
and the crowd like courtesy laughs.
Why, how long are you back for?
You hear the people in the,
and I looked at him, and the Chancellor of Germany said, what would you say, Mr. President, if you picked up the paper tomorrow in the London Times, and the London Times said, 1,000 people break through the House of Commons, break down the doors, 2 bobbies are killed in order to stop the...
Well, I got to give him credit. He's at least coherent enough to remember.
I never thought about it from that perspective.
That he was setting up a story about January 6th and trying to dramatize January 6th, because that's really all these people have, is trying to scare the public about white supremacy and democracy. Yeah, the people who didn't run a primary and who the other guy off the ballot, that's their argument for democracy. So there's Jon Stewart caping for Biden, and me showing you the actual difference between Biden and Trump in February of this year. So another clip from this episode, another like one of the I think hot points anyway, was CNN brought on John Bolton, neocon John Bolton, and we just showed Andrew Sullivan talking about how the Republican primary is about no neocons. And so what do the neocons do? They support the Democratic candidate because they know that their gig is up in the Republican Party. And so here's CNN platforming John Bolton. Let me find this. Where's the... I won't bore you with my commentary. I'll try to stick to the actual tape here. But let's watch this. And I love when Republicans are like, the Democrats are so evil and scandalous. They'll do this. They're not even genuine. Yeah, because they're all Republicans now. And I've gone over this 1,000 times. So let's just bask in the glory of your boy John Bolton here. Now, this is CNN just puffing your favorite neocon, John Bolton, just puffing the shit out of him. Watch this. This is disgusting.
On a third Republican presidential nomination, one of his former top aides is stepping up his warnings about what a second Trump term could look like. And when I say former top aide, of course, there are many who have issued similar.
when I need to know what's going on in politics, the first person I want to hear from is John Bolton. I mean, you know, the Colonel Sanders looking mustache guy, the little cracker dude for who basically, you know, try to, he looks like Yosemite Sam. The guy looks like Yosemite Sam. He is literally the human human embodiment of Yosemite Sam. Anyway.
Similar warnings about what could happen, including Trump's own vice president, Mike Pence. But this is one who had an office just steps away from the Oval. John Bolton will join us live in just a moment. You'll recall his book about his time working
You can't
in
wait,
Trump's
can
White
you?
House,
Isn't
titled
how
The
they're setting
Room
it
Where
up?
It
Like this
Happened.
guy's like some kind of
It's out in
legend.
paperback today with a new foreword, The Room Where It Will Happen Again. Bolton is arguing that if Trump gets back into the White House,
Very quick side note here, and I may not have missed this during the original broadcast, but Bolton is promoting a book he's selling. That's why he's doing this. So just to give you the full context.
it will be the retribution presidency. He writes that Trump really only cares about retribution for himself, and it will consume much of a second term. It's an echo of what we have heard repeatedly throughout Trump's campaign.
For those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
Bolton is predicting a continuing constitutional crisis in which Trump would have the authority to order his Justice Department to dismiss 2 of his 4 indictments, or, if necessary,
Kind of like what Biden's people are going to do now with his son, maybe.
pardon himself. He warns that if Trump did so, and after a legal battle played out, the Supreme Court invalidated his own pardon, it might still take yet another impeachment to actually remove him from office. Quote, he will not depart voluntarily.
So they're already setting up for if he wins, you know, obviously trying to fuck up him from, you know, to stop him from doing anything.
This time, Bolton warns. On the foreign policy front, Bolton's message is also dire, saying that Trump's short attention span renders, quote, coherent foreign policy almost unattainable. And that is most
Coherent foreign policy in the way John Bolton wants it.
harmful national security failure is the
See,
quote.
and that's, again, I keep going back to this because as much hate Trump as much as you want, he is kind of the kind of guy you need to counter fuckheads like John Bolton. I can only imagine what goes on in their meetings where John Bolton's like, see, we need to go into this country. And Trump's like, why? And he's like, because, you know, that doesn't make any sense. And John Bolton's like, oh, he just doesn't understand. He just doesn't understand foreign policy, guys.
Isolationist virus now coursing through the Republican Party. Bolton writes that it is a close contest between Putin and Xi Jinping. Who would be the happiest to see Trump back in office?
Russia and China both want him, for sure. They want him. You should be scared about that.
Relish a second term, he writes. Trump.
You should be scared of Russia and China. Like, who fucking cares if Russia and China would be happy with our elected leaders? It's none of their fucking business. Who gives a shit?
Trump will want to enhance his personal relationship with Xi. He adds, quote, imagine Trump's euphoria at resuming contact with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. All 3
we can't fearmonger against him and have a war if the president's talking to him like he's a human being.
Democratic leaders, I should note, that Trump has repeatedly brought up on the 2024 campaign trail.
Kim Jong-un leads 1.4 billion people.
No, this is good.
And there's no doubt about who the boss is. And they want me to say he's not an intelligent man. I got along with Putin.
Okay, what is wrong with that? What, like and this is again, he got in trouble for saying that Xi Jinping was an intelligent person. That's a fact. He didn't get to be the leader of China by being a dumbass.
Let me tell you, I got along with him really well. And that's a good thing. President Xi is like central casting. This
is how out of touch CNN is. You're supposed to be upset by this. You're supposed to be upset that a former president wanted to talk to Russia. How dare he? After what they did to Hillary, hacking the DNC emails.
Nobody in Hollywood that can play the role of President Xi. The look, the strength, the voice.
Here are in my and so with Trump too, it's like he does these rallies where he just talks on stage endlessly.
Seeking retribution through the Justice Department, what he would do potentially through the Defense Department, and some of the other agencies of government as well, would produce constant constitutional agitation.
So I'm going to get to this later in another segment, but I have a clip of Donald Trump Jr. saying, "Burn it all down." Like he's basically saying a lame duck Trump, a second term lame duck Trump, will take apart the security state because he has nothing to run for a second term. So, I mean, just the idea, like that's why these guys have to fearmonger like this. Like, he'll ruin everything. Yeah, for guys like you, John Bolton, of course he will. And again, I don't think Trump is some savior. I don't think, he's anywhere near the hero that the right makes him out to be. But the thing I like about him is that people like this guy are losing their minds that he might be president again. To me, that's a good thing. To me, that means like him coming back would be a good thing. Even if it's just to reset the game. I think, anyway, let's watch a little more of this trite nonsense.
So we're going to pause right there for a second and move on to the next segment. You don't really need to hear everything that John Bolton has to say. You know what he's going to say, and you know why he sucks. What I am going to do is jump ahead to, in this episode, I made what I called the leftist case for a second term of Donald Trump. And I think I made some pretty good points, and I don't want to bore you with the whole thing, but let's jump up here and watch a little bit of this from February. This is from February 14th, actually. February 14th of 2024, Valentine's Day. Here we go.
I'm going to throw up the banner for you right now and show you what it's called. The leftist case for Donald Trump's second term. Yes, that's right. I am going to make a case to the left that another Donald Trump term would be better than another Joe Biden term. And I don't think I need to really work that hard to do that. All you have to do is look around at what's going on versus what happened the previous 4 years. And if you have any kind of a functional brain, you're probably with me to some degree, right? Especially when these are the two old farts that we get to choose, the red and blue plate. The way I like to describe American politics to people in 2024 is, do you want your shit sandwich on a red plate or a blue plate? That's basically what it is. And let's start with talking about Israel, okay? I made this meme, and I think it's friggin' brilliant. Check it out, because it's kind of making fun of the whole MAGA thing. How, they can see clearly that the January 6th thing was kind of an op, kind of a overhyped, campaign for political gain on the behalf of the Democrats, but they can't see the same dynamic at play with October 7th. So it's the Drake meme, he's like, whoa, no, January 6th. But he's like, yeah, October 7th, yeah. So I want to start by making this case by saying neither candidate is good on Israel. And that's what you got. At least, and I think Keaton and Russell made this point, at least with Trump, you have a wild card. He who knows? He may be able to pull something off that Biden won't. The thing about Trump is he also has kind of an adversarial relationship with Netanyahu, I think. And for whatever reason, it's probably some egotistical reason, but it doesn't matter. That gives him motivation to kind of push back on him a little bit, which is not happening with the Biden administration, because as we all know, Biden actually doesn't run anything. He is a facade for the corporate interests that bought their way into the White House. Because I noticed the other day too, it's so funny with Trump. It's almost like the neocons, when they got Biden and they saw what Trump was doing, like, we can do that. And then they just Biden put the guy from Raytheon in as the head of national security or whatever, Lloyd Austin guy. I can't remember his title, something like that, Homeland Security, whatever. He's the former like head of Raytheon. You know, Trump kind of like set a precedent for that. So again, I'm not arguing that Trump is some great savior.
Important election in our lifetimes. No matter what duck is
Good, Mr. Road Grimes. Well, I'm going to show you. And this is a little bit self-indulgent because I'm playing a clip of one of my earlier shows from last year. But I didn't want to go dig up the actual clip itself. So this was the easiest way for me to find it. So bear with me as I watch a clip of myself. But I want you to listen to what Donald Trump Jr. tells Tim Pool about a second Trump term. Just listen to what he has to say here because it's very good. Here, I'll
From
just do
Trump.
this.
No, it's not. But Don, what's your vision of the future?
Listen, I think you need someone to go burn it all down.
Yes.
You know, Trump as a lame duck is actually much better than someone that has to get reelected again and has to play that game. I want someone who will go in there and literally burn it to the ground because it needs to be that like I used to believe, guys, like, you know, even when I got into this, I functioned at a high level in business and we did billion-dollar deals and, you know, real shit. And, you know, I got there and was like, well, listen, this is what America is. And I believe this and I'm a patriot. And I'm like, oh my God, even, you know, once I went through what I went through with Russia, you know, 50 hours of testimony and Adam Schiff up there saying I committed treason somehow. And then I see, you know, well, of course, nothing happens with that. Of course, none of that was actually accurate. It was all a perjury trap, hoping that in 50 hours of testimony, asking me the same, you know, 1,000 questions, maybe I say it a little bit differently the 50th time I'm asked, and therefore I committed perjury, and that's how they get you. But even I, who sort of had my eyes open during that, were like, well, there's still something to it, right? We all made the same mistake with the FBI and what they tried to do to Michael Flynn. It's like, well, it's the FBI. Like, you know, there must be some truth to it, right? They're not fully corrupted. It's the FBI, the CIA, same thing.
Well, so let's,
you know, then we're seeing them go after parents in this. Those people are domestic terrorists, a concerned parent going to a PTA meeting. But, you know, some, you know, trans shooter can have a manifesto and kill a bunch of Christian kids. And, well, that's not domestic terrorists because they're Christians. Like, who really gives a shit? You know, that it's really scary where we're at. And
well, so
you know,
let me ask
I want
you.
to burn it to the ground.
So, but when you say that, like, what's the practical step? Is that what was that policy that Trump Sr. he's going to fire?
Schedule F.
Schedule F.
Schedule F.
When you say that, is that what you were meaning? Like, we're going to go and we're going to defund the FBI. We're going to fire all the bureaucrats.
Yes. I mean, you got to do as much as you possibly can. You got to get other people who are willing to go along with that. Because, I mean, I think that's what, you know, in 2016, we're like, hey, we're coming in from the outside. You sort of assume that, you know, hey, you may have a little bit differences in policy and whatever, but, you know, people still want the best for America. And that's just not even remotely true. You know, these bureaucrats, they wouldn't succeed in so many other things. And they're going to hold on to what little power they have because they wouldn't get it anywhere else.
I mean, how can you argue with that? I love when he goes, I want to burn it all down, literally. And Tim goes, you mean figuratively. You mean figuratively. But that kind of attitude from Trump Jr. is part of my case because, again, we've seen how hard it is. If you volunteered for the Bernie Sanders campaign at any point, we won that primary in 2019. Bernie won. I mean, they crushed him. The corporate interests in the Democratic Party just basically booted him and installed Biden. It's undeniable at this point. People have written books about it. And so I might not agree, like all the stuff he said about trans shooter, whatever, like all that, it's all conservative red meat, whatever. I don't care about any of that stuff. And I don't think that they're going to act on it. I think it's stuff that they just say for their base. So I want to stop there. That's basically, there's a lot of other, you know, pieces to the case I made there, but I think those are the biggest ones. And that last one I think is so key because you're kind of seeing that starting to unfold now with some of the appointees they're making. They actually followed through and like they're going to try to put Kash Patel in. And again, regardless of what you think about these people, you have to remember that a lot of your thought process around these people is formed by
media sources that despise them and are trying to protect entrenched interests. So the next episode that I pulled some clips from for you was on February 23rd of 2024. So we're at the end of February, the shortest month of the year. And there's some interesting stuff in here, starting with RFK Jr. and Tucker Carlson for Julian Assange. So where did I pull this out of? This one is about 27 minutes in. And let's just watch some of this here. I did cover Richard Medhurst in this episode too, but I think, like I said, I'm trying to keep it as brief as possible. There's a lot of stuff to cover here. So enjoy this and report on this regularly. But there's only one person who had a major platform at one point who does not anymore, who has been a vocal defender of Julian Assange. And that's this guy. The white
locked away in one place or another for more than a decade. Julian Assange is so despised by elements within the permanent U.S. government that at one point, CIA Director Mike Pompeo discussed murdering him in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he was seeking asylum. Mike Pompeo has never been charged for that, which is a crime.
I wonder why Tucker lost his show on network television.
Unelected bureaucrats can't just murder people they don't like. And he probably never will be charged with a crime. Virtually the entire ruling class in Washington is opposed to Julian Assange. And that's the reason that he has sat for years now in Belmarsh prison in London. Keep in mind, Julian Assange has not been charged with a crime in Great Britain, and yet he's being held there. So this fall, we went to Belmarsh and we asked Julian Assange, why do you think you're being held as the most wanted man in America without ever being charged with a real crime? Here's what he told us.
This is interesting.
We talked about why he is in prison, and my first question to him was, what do you think this is actually about,
Julian
since
Assange.
you haven't been accused of a crime? And he said something that really struck me, and I think having spent my life in Washington is absolutely right. He said he first became famous when WikiLeaks published documents and videos that the U.S. government had kept secret from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were gravely embarrassing to the Pentagon. But that wasn't the red line. The red line was several years later when WikiLeaks published information about surveillance by the CIA. And so I asked him directly, are you aware of anyone being harmed or killed on the basis of information that he published? He said, of course not. And he said it in a sincere way. Like, by the way, I think if people were killed because of his publishing, because of the stories that he put online, he would feel bad about it. I mean, he seems like a humane person. He withheld information about CIA because he didn't want to get people hurt. He famously published the contents of Hillary Clinton's email account. I asked him, when you
final straw
published these emails, did you realize how powerful Hillary Clinton was? We had a conversation about that, and I said, looking back, do you regret doing that? He goes, honestly, it was fun. You'll notice that Julian Assange was not.
So I have to be a little brief with these clips, but just to remind you, Tucker Carlson was one of the few voices in mainstream media who was for Julian Assange, and now Julian Assange is out. We're hoping that the charges will be dropped against him, but we'll see how that continues to unfold. So another thing I covered in this episode was the pro-choice GOP. There's a whole segment about the leftist mafia here. But I think this is incredibly relevant because it just kind of shows you how much of the Democratic case during this last election was completely marketing. They couldn't run on a good economy. They couldn't run on like all the great things they've done because they didn't do any of those things. So they had to scare women about abortion. And so here is kind of a little bit of my breakdown of how the GOP itself is kind of pro-choice now. When you see, these new female candidates.
Reality is the mainstream Republican candidate for president in the Republican Party, the mainstream thought leader of the party right now is Nikki Haley. And here's what Nikki Haley had to say about abortion. Republicans need to be honest about abortion. With her party reeling on the issue, the GOP presidential hopeful staked out a more compromising position than several of her rivals. As much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life, she said. Let's find consensus. We don't need to divide America over this issue anymore. So that's these guys spend all this time fear mongering over abortion rights for in Alabama, and ignore completely where the rest of the Republican Party stands on this issue, especially the Nikki Haley's. I mean, Trump on abortion is, he put in the judges. He's going to claim credit for overturning Roe, but it really wasn't him that did that. That was a long process that happened over the years. And frankly, the Democrats are largely to blame for not stopping it. They had the ability for years to codify Roe and make sure that it couldn't have been overturned, and they didn't. So because they wanted to run on it. So there you have, the mainstream voices. You also have people like Nancy Mace. There are other Republican females that are kind of like leaning into the pro-choice realm. So that was just one of the things that the Democrats used as kind of a, cudgel to get people into the fold when they couldn't really use anything else. So another great piece from this I want to show you is Bernie Sanders endorsing Joe Biden, senile Joe Biden, who we covered, in a previous episode. I showed you clips from with the debates and the difference between Joe Biden cognitively and Trump cognitively. And so here's your boy Bernie jumping into the fold here and endorsing Joe Biden. Let me start this from the beginning. Let's see if. All right, here we go. In Brooklyn. And then this next one is a little bit later in the cycle, but I thought this was funny because it has a picture of Joe Biden under the headline. Like they just went, okay, just stick another old guy in there. No one will notice. Bernie Sanders handily wins Utah contest amid record turnout. So the working title of this piece is The Sad Trajectory of Bernie Sanders. And here's where the downturn starts. Inside Hillary Clinton's secret takeover of the DNC. This was well documented. In 2020, they rigged the Iowa primary. We just saw with the Mike Benz piece I did earlier. This is the language. You know what NLP is? A lot of people talk about this, and this verifiable. A surprise. And if you watch my piece on the David Front in Brooklyn, undeniable.
The future of American democracy. What's at stake is whether we have some.
As Bernie endorses Biden this year.
An easy decision for you to endorse the president for re-election. Why?
I don't think one has many alternatives here. What's at stake is the future of American democracy. What's at stake is whether we have some right-wing demagogue.
As we just saw with the Mike Benz piece I did earlier, this is the language. You know what NLP is? A lot of people talk about this, and this is the way the press works. They repeat these phrases over and over again until everyone in the country is at the water cooler going, Bernie Sanders is too socialist to be the president. Donald Trump is a sexist, but Joe Biden is not.
Running this country, or a pathological liar, or somebody who's trying to divide us up, or whether we re-elect somebody who is a very decent human being who's trying to do the opposite.
See, and this is the thing that drives me insane about the Democrats is all of the stuff they're saying about Trump could easily be said about Joe Biden. He has verifiable, sexual assault claims made against him from Tara Reid and Lucy Flores. He's been a corrupt politician for 50 years. His family's running corrupt business dealings. There's proof of that. So if that's your choice between one corrupt guy or the other, where do you draw the line? Because it's clear that a Joe Biden presidency will continue the same trajectory we've been on for the last 50 years, which is why people like Trump are being looked to. And if the argument's going to be who's more corrupt, Trump or Biden, they're both corrupt. So Trump wins that to me, because at least he's not the same thing we've had for the last 4 years.
To bring the American people together. Look, Chris, I think it is a surprise.
And if you watch my piece on the David Frum Steve Bannon debate, same thing. David Frum, neocon, spends the entire time saying the exact same shit Bernie is saying right here. And this is just, it's so sad. This is like, you go from that rising piece when Bernie had the public in his hands. All he had to do was have the balls to stand up to these people, and he folded to them. And now he's a sad shell of a man.
Nobody. When I say that I disagree with Biden on many issues. But on the other hand, I think he deserves credit for what he has accomplished. And our job now is to progress.
What has he accomplished besides getting us embroiled in 3 or 4 more massive wars, Bernie?
Progressive movement is to
This
rally
goes
the
on
people
for
of-
quite a while as I tore Bernie apart, which is not difficult to do. But just to remind you, what a sad sack Bernie was. This is going to continue the sad trajectory of Bernie Sanders, with him caping for a certain vassal state of the USA in the Middle East. And just watch this.
Now that it doesn't matter anymore, that he needs to do so politically, but just listen to how he refuses to give his real opinion on any of the questions she's asking.
In addition to stopping the billions of dollars in military aid that Israel gets from the United States every year, would you back calls for a cultural, sporting, and economic boycott of Israel?
I am nervous about economic boycotts of any country, to be honest with you.
Now, that is an absolute lie. The United States has an economic boycott of all kinds of countries, of Cuba, of Venezuela, of Syria, and Bernie Sanders supports all of those.
Russia.
He's not opposed to economic boycotts of countries. Let's go on.
But right now, what people want to do, they can do what they want to do. But right now, again, my job as a United States Senator, and I'm kind of leading that effort in the Senate, is to tell Netanyahu that he is not going to get any more US aid.
Did you feel nervous about the boycott movement against apartheid South Africa? Was that a concern you had at the time?
Such a great follow-up.
What I thought that
So
U.S. journalists do not do that.
that's a good question as well. One of the things that took down the apartheid regime of South Africa in the 1980s was exactly the kind of economic boycott Bernie Sanders just said he's unwilling to support. So she asked him, well, what about your views of South Africa and the boycott against apartheid South Africa that was called for by the Black people of South Africa trying to end apartheid? Were you also against that on this principle of yours that you don't support boycotts? And here's what he said.
What I thought that as an apartheid state at that point, it was important to put pressure. But people can do as they want. And that's all.
Do you think that it's right that British citizens and American citizens can go and fight in the IDF when, as you say, there are so...
So I'm just going to pause there because, again, I don't want to spend too much time on any of these stories. But the last story in this particular stream was about Jon Stewart again. And I think the tentative title of the segment was Jon Stewart is a punk bitch. And you'll see why. Let me just jump up to this piece right here. And this starts around, let's see, 137. Oh, it's like right here.
Ilk are pushing is that there's really no difference between our.
Is now, last one is about your boy Jon Stewart. And let's just watch this.
Difference between our urinal caked chaotic subways and your candelabred beautiful subways is the literal price of freedom. But the goal that Carlson and his ilk are pushing is that there's really no difference between our systems. In fact, theirs might be a little bit better. The question is, why? Why is Tucker doing this? Here's why. It's because the old civilizational battle was communism versus capitalism. That's what drove the world since World War II. Russia was the enemy then. But now they think the battle is woke versus unwoke. And in that fight, Putin is an ally to the right. He's their friend.
So Jon Stewart, wow, like another sad trajectory. The guy came back to ruin his own legacy by completely glossing over. You know, it's clear to me that he didn't watch this interview that Tucker Carlson did with Putin. None of these people did. They just attacked Tucker Carlson for having the gall to talk to Putin, which is something that reporters have done for years, talk to people that we're at war with. But let's let John finish with his pro-DNC diatribe. I called it, I have to say. When he first came out a couple weeks ago with that piece on Biden, and people were like, "Oh, how dare you, Jon Stewart?" I could tell it was an op. He was embedded in that was criticism of Trump that tried to equate Trump's, senility to Biden's, which is a joke itself. And so this week he came back to suck the ass of the people who criticized him last week by doing this.
Unfortunately, he is also a brutal and ruthless dictator. So now they have to make Americans a little more.
And if you watch Tucker's interview or any of the preamble to it, he said that he's not pro-Russia. He's not doing this because he supports Russia. He's doing this because he wants people to have the information, and no one else is talking to Putin. And the security state tried to stop him from doing it the first time. I wonder why, John.
Comfortable with that. I mean, liberty is nice, but have you seen Russia's shopping carts? And Tucker would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling assassins.
In a statement to the New York Times, Carlson said, quote, "It is horrifying what happened to Navalny. The whole thing is barbaric and awful. No decent person would defend it."
Correct. No decent person would.
He didn't defend. He did the interview before the Navalny thing happened, and that's a little suspect. But I want to show you, just in case you haven't seen it, the most important part of the Tucker Carlson Putin interview that people like Jon Stewart completely glossed over. No, they're not talking about this part.
And that's
the
about
interview.
someone who's very famous in the United States, probably not here. Evan Gershkovich, who's the Wall Street Journal reporter. He's 32, and he's been in prison for almost a year. This is a huge story in the United States. And I just want to ask you directly, without getting into the details of it or your version of what happened, if as a sign of your decency, you would be willing to release him to us and we'll bring him back to the United States.
I can't remember who said it, but would you ever see a U.S. reporter ask a question like that about Assange to Biden or any of the? No, of course not. That took a lot of balls.
Мы столько сделали жестов доброй воли, что, мне кажется, мы исчерпали все линии.
We have done so many gestures of goodwill out of decency that I think we have run out of them.
Ни разу не ответил. Но
We have never seen anyone reciprocate to us in a similar manner.
что
So there you have
However, in theory,
Jon Stewart caping again for the powerful, for the just like a corporate media shill, glossing over, the real crux of Tucker Carlson's interview with a foreign leader. And it's very sad. So before we go into March, I'm going to jump to the comments real quick. It looks like we got anti-Warren in the mix here quite a bit. Trump is deep state up. Different from Biden or Obama. I mean, a lot of people say this, but again, it's like, why did they try to shoot at him? Why did I'm just going over the last year of propaganda of them trying to keep him out. So maybe he is. I'm not saying I know for sure, but I don't necessarily think that that's the truth. I think who knows? We're going to find out. So I don't mean to be a dick, but you watch me too much. Jimmy's Trump is extremely civil, and so is Biden. Well, we can agree to disagree there. Jimmy Dore is one of the few people over the years who has told the truth
on a lot of these issues and been slandered for it. And same with Duty. I don't agree with those guys on every single thing they say, but they do make a lot of great points. So let's see what else you got here. The fact that douche dissidents sides with Candace Owens and MAGA chuds that promote Epstein's best friend Trump. I mean, politics is complicated, right? It's you in American politics, and everyone will say this, you got to be an adult and go with one of the parties that's going to win. So it's kind of like it's about compromise, really. You know, you're never going to get 100% of what you want. And I think what you're seeing with people like Do Dissidents and Jimmy over the last, 4 years, 5 years is this kind of these fractured coalitions coming together on things that they agree on. And I think you have a lot more influence over MAGA on things you don't agree on when you work together on things you do. So, I mean, I don't know what your beef is with Do Dissidents and Jimmy Dore, but I appreciate you jumping in the comments and sharing your feelings on that. So we're going to move on to March now. And the first bit of tape I got for you here is the media covering for Joe Biden's senility. After we've seen, all of this footage of him, and I think this was, maybe like right after the debates. Don't quote me on it. We'll watch the clip for context, but they did a lot to try and pretend that he was the guy and he was going to be okay. And we're going to revisit some of that right here. And I think a lot of what I highlighted in this piece was how age was always an issue when it was Bernie Sanders, but when it came to Joe Biden, the media sang a little bit of a different song. So enjoy.
U.S. history. Well, he's been beat for that record now by Joe Biden. But check this out. If Bernie Sanders succeeds in his bid for the presidency, which he confirmed on Wednesday, he will be the oldest person ever to be elected president. The junior senator from Vermont will turn 75 2 months before the 2016 general election. If he were to win the nomination, one leading online gambling site puts the odds of that happening 50-1. Yeah, so they're already so this is from Chris Wilson in April of 2015. So they were already going hard on Bernie here. So then they have this chart about the age of electability, right? Let me switch this for you so you can see it. So this kind of, look, we have data to show that, see how much more older Bernie Sanders was than even Ronald Reagan. And then they go down to Clinton, who has never been a president, but they're just kind of, this was the way that the press was selling Clinton with Lara Trump on Saturday Night Live. No stranger to easy jokes about aging presidents. Poked fun at both the fall and March 25th conference. A reporter asked Biden if he planned to run for a second term. A question, quipped SNL's Michael Shea, which was probably the nicest way to ask him if he plans on being alive in 3 years. So, the media at large has been going pretty hard on Biden about the age thing, but not hard enough. I mean, and when you see stuff like this, let's watch this really quick. This is Biden a couple months ago. Ageism to racism is stupid to begin with, because there is, as you age, first of all, you get a lot wiser, you get a lot smarter, but you do, a lot of people, I mean, I can't speak for myself because I take good care of myself, but a lot of people lose their edge as they get older. Maybe not even 45, maybe 60 is a better age to claim, but this is just the reality. And what is so funny to me is you see the tone of these articles, defending Biden's age in contrast with what they did to Bernie Sanders. And I've got more of this stuff, so let's keep going. So here's Howard Dean. Remember Howard Dean? I don't know if you remember him, but if you do remember Howard Dean, this is what you remember. And again, that's another example of the media. Like Howard Dean was run out of the Democratic primary for getting excited at a campaign rally, because at that time
All right,
he
so
was
let's pause there. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of proofs I go into there, but you get the idea. Basically, I was just kind of showing the juxtaposition of how the media spoke about Bernie Sanders' age versus Joe Biden, who they were clearly there to defend. So the next little bit I took from this is this Biden's State of the Union address, which is, was actually absolutely terrible. But I think it's Tim Dillon I have talking about it. And so this is actually really good stuff. Enjoy this one.
Stephen Colbert's live monologue. So I'm going to show you a breakdown of Biden's speech from someone who's actually someone with integrity, who isn't, sucking a corporate money teat. And I use teat because I didn't want to use another part of bodily anatomy that would be much dirtier. But watch your boy Tim Dillon here. Just take it away.
Drug. I think it's called the Lazarus drug. I think this is a drug that they put people on at the end when they're in it's stage 4, but they still have to be the president. Like, this is the final. This is what they've got. Make no mistake, what he is on is the best they can do. That guy at that podium is, you will not get that guy any other time. You might get it in a debate. Did you see when he was having ice cream talking about Israel and Gaza? You're not going to get that guy in the ice cream shop. You're not getting him in the Oval Office when he kind of doesn't know what's happening. You're getting him very, very rarely. That level of energy, that level of clarity. Except for, again, a few, because nothing's perfect. No drug is perfect. Let's take a look at this.
So he starts this by talking about what kind of drugs they must have had to inject Biden with to get him even to this point.
Not really.
Here he goes. Go to the pin. Go to the pin.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal.
Good. He says illegal.
That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
Good. He brings it back to him. How good was that? No, but that was good. I was shocked. I was on the couch going, who the
I love how Tim, he kind of facetiously impersonates the Stephen Colberts and the Seth Meyers of the world. How good was that? How good was that?
is this? Lincoln Riley. And he's like, she was killed by an illegal. Everybody's like, okay. And then he's like,
by the way, he did an apology tour the next day for saying illegal. I mean, whatever.
And he brings it back to him. He's like, and my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself, and everyone has to quiet down. But then he's kind of, now watch. Can we watch a little more? Because now he kind of doesn't quite know where he is right after that moment. Right after that moment, he's a little confused. He's a little befuddled because, you interrupted his flow. He's been practicing this speech, every single day, and they interrupted him. Marjorie Taylor Greene interrupted his flow. And then he's like, so then the moment after that, he's a little all over the place. He's not, but I mean, I was shocked.
It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really.
There it is. See. There he goes. Where is he? Where is he? What do you get? Get the pin. Get the pin. Get the gavel. Morgan and Morgan.
Lincoln Riley.
That's right.
An innocent young woman who was killed
They should always have things for him.
That's right.
They should
But how
always
many
have
thousands of people
visual
being killed by
aids
illegals?
and props for him.
To
By
our
the way,
parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself.
pick something
I
else up.
understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border,
this is right.
People pay these smugglers $8,000.
What is
bucks
he
to get
talking
across the
about?
border.
Keep going,
because
Pop.
they know if they get by.
Oh boy.
If they get by.
Yep.
And let into the country.
We're there.
it's
We're
6
almost
to 8
there.
years before they have a hearing.
That's correct.
I
And
love
it's
also,
worth
by
them
the way,
taking the-
watch this Mike Johnson guy, his face as Biden trails off. I'm going to take it back just a little bit. Just like watch the look on that guy's face as Biden kind of like starts rambling and going. So we're gonna cut out right there on the Biden thing. You get the idea. You've seen plenty of footage that he's senile, and we all watched this. And this was in March of 2024. So I'm just going back and retracing the steps that led up to where we are today on December 29th of 2024. This is back in March. So the last bit of tape I have here for you is there was a debate over Jon Stewart, because of course Jon Stewart was going hard on Trump about the real estate conviction. And so a lot of people dug into Jon Stewart's real estate issues. And so there's a whole thing here about Jon Stewart's kind of attacks on Trump with Dave Smith. So I'm going to play a little bit of this for you. Get him into court for overvaluing his property is the point Tim was making. But the press tried to misconstrue it as he's accusing Jon Stewart of fraud. He's actually not doing that. He's actually just trying to show you that how disingenuous the case against Trump is. But let's go back a little bit and watch this bit with Dave Smith.
You're a product of your time. We all are. But there's something about Jon Stewart. Like, look, the point I'm making in regards to Jon Stewart is that this whole, you can't hear from the other side because there's a war. This is all the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
This isn't old. A few months back. It had been published up there since
a
few months. What is that? This whole, you can't hear from.
So this whole you can't.
There's an interview that was just going viral the other day, an interview with Saddam Hussein, reasonable standards that we all had up until 5.
Try to convey a mixture. When you're sitting there interviewing Putin,
everything Putin just said there is a fact. It's just a historical fact. And it's not, Putin didn't say, assuming his translators tell him that, you know what I mean? Putin didn't say that's why Germany was forced to invade, or that's why Poland was in the wrong for not giving Danzig back. But it's just a fact that.
All right. So apparently I pulled the wrong clip there. That was Dave Smith explaining Tucker Carlson's thing about Jon Stewart, basically saying kind of the same stuff I was saying about how, it used to be okay to interview the other side in a war and find out, why they're mad or what their beef is and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I want to go back to the comments for a second because this lady's been arguing with herself for the last hour. I'm out. I can't listen to this maggot shut anymore. Promoting Tucker Carlson is absolutely evil. Well, I'm glad you wandered into my channel and hopefully you learned something. But really, all I'm doing here is going back through the last year of commentary and kind of showing you why the Democrats lost. So I can understand why that makes you mad. It sounds like you're kind of a dyed-in-the-wool partisan who believes all the nonsense that the corporate media serves you, and that's fine. I'm not mad at you. I wish you the best. Find something that reflects your personal political views back at you. Just tune into CNN or MSNBC. Go do that. It sounds like that's more your speed, if you understand what I'm talking about here, which you obviously don't. So we're going to move into April now. And there's a lot of good stuff that happened in April. Not good stuff, but stuff that we need to discuss anyway. And the first of those things that we need to discuss is something that I think a lot of people forgot about and is, I think, even more relevant right now than maybe it was at the time. And that is when the IDF attacked a bunch of food workers and killed them in Gaza. The WCK, the World's Central Kitchen, which is, pretty much a non-political outfit. But let me jump in here and show you some of this footage. Here we go. Leads on this, because here is a video the WCK workers posted.
We're at the Jirabala kitchen, and we've got the mise en place.
This is who these
Tell us a
people
little
are.
bit about it, Chef Ali.
This is the place to cook the rice. So we have all the spices for boil the water. Be ready for put the boiling water inside the rice. This is the stir fry. We put oil, we stir fry onions. We have the spices, and after we stir fry the rice, we add the water. The water is aromatized with this spices, this mix of spices. There is the black lemon, there is chili, 7 mixed spices, bay leaf, salt, pepper, and tomato paste.
Indeed. So this is the beautiful, fragrant, aromatic rice that will be served today from Jirabala kitchen. Thank you.
So I just wanted you to see the face of terror that these people, they're clearly terrorists. So here's what CBS has to say about these people being
Director
killed.
Bill Burns traveling to Egypt to revive negotiations to release the Israeli hostages in exchange for a ceasefire with Hamas. Earlier in the week, President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held an intense phone call where Biden urged the Prime Minister to conclude a deal without delay and to open
This must be from CBS Canada or something, judging by this guy's accent.
more humanitarian aid corridors to Gaza.
Did you threaten to stop military aid to Israel? I asked them to do what they're doing.
The push for a ceasefire comes as the Israeli Defense Forces shared the findings.
I asked them to do what they're doing. When I see Biden, I have to play this clip because people forget about this, and this is from a couple years ago. Just remember this when he got up and walked off of Nicole Wallace's show. That's just the way that I see Biden. Let's switch that one more time. He's like a zombie. Anyway, back to this one.
Into the strike that killed 7 aid workers from the world's.
Okay, that's key there. Investigation. Let me back that up just a little bit because I sidetracked with
Investigation into the strike that killed 7 aid.
Okay.
Ceasefire comes as the Israeli Defense Forces shared the findings of its investigation into the strike that killed 7 aid workers from the World Central Kitchen. Israel's military says it mistakenly believed that Hamas militants were inside a World Central Kitchen vehicle after misidentifying an aid worker, likely carrying a bag, as a militant with a gun. They targeted that car with a drone at 11:09 p.m. Some inside it fled to a second car, which was also hit by a drone 2 minutes later. And the same thing happened with a third. An attack in
And the same thing happened with a third. So this is the mainstream media.
Israeli
Come on.
military standard operating procedures.
At the time, they were certain that they were targeting Hamas. This tragic mistake could and should have been prevented.
CBS News has also learned that U.S. intelligence believes Iran is preparing a major attack in retaliation for an Israeli airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus this week.
I love that pivot too. They're like, okay, they said it was a mistake. Anyway, Iran is ready to attack.
U.S. officials tell CBS News Iran is making preparations to launch a swarm of drones and missiles timed around the upcoming end of Ramadan. Cristian Benavides, CBS News.
The smartest thing that Iran and Russia can do at this point is just sit tight and let the U.S. collapse on itself. I mean, just get out of. So this is how bad things were back in April, and it doesn't seem like they've gotten any better. In fact, it seems like they've gotten a lot worse. But let's keep going here. The next little piece of tape I got for you, or a piece of digital stream, if you want to call it that, is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is really going to infuriate the people who hate MAGA, but this is actually a really good clip of her talking about the overblown war state. And, just I like a lot of what she says here. I'm not going to lie. The horse's mouth.
She joins us now to explain what
Marjorie
she's
Taylor
doing
Greene's
in the
take.
face of this insanity. Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming on. Do we mischaracterize any of that?
Me.
Do you think? I mean,
No,
from
not at
an
all.
outsider's perspective, it seems like Mike Johnson is working the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, the supposed conservative.
She looks like she might have caught a little sunburn down in Mar-a-Lago.
He's working with the Biden administration to put the priorities of Ukraine above the priorities of the United States and to do something that his own voters don't want him to do. Is that true, do you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Tucker, because the details of the foreign aid package that we're going to be voting on next week when we go back to Washington, we're reading about the details in the news.
This is what Jane is advocating for, Jane Harman of the of Iridium Communications Inc., as the Aspen Institute and the World Economic Forum.
Let me tell you something. Not one Republican member of our conference that I have spoken to has any idea what is in this foreign aid package that's going to give $60 billion to Ukraine. And that is even the leadership offices. They haven't heard from Mike Johnson on the details. We're reading about it in the news the same way the American people are. And it's outrageous. When you saw Zelensky right there on that interview talking about, oh, we're going to lose territory. Oh, we really need this money. This $60 billion should have been approved yesterday. Let me tell you, we are losing our country.
He sounds like Jane Harman, who was actually just in Ukraine and probably going over talking points with
To the
Zelensky.
illegal invasion that's happening every single day at our southern border. And
So
I am
this is where the pivot is like, okay, the illegal invasion. Okay, again, the illegal invasion has nothing to do with the border or like Republicans think that they're smuggling in Mexicans to sway the vote. Now, listen, there is proof to that theory. There's definitely some foundational data behind it. However, if they really want to steal an election, do you really think they need immigrants to vote? It's all done on computers. It's not difficult to hack these voting machines. If we really want fair elections, we need to have a paper trail and audits. But, this is why the pivot to the migrant workers, it goes back to the pitting workers against each other when we're really kind of like all on the same team here. But I will say, sunburned MTG here has the right take on Ukraine. I'm going to show you why.
pissed off about it because the American people are pissed off about it. And while our so-called Republican Speaker of the House is only working with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Ukraine First Mitch McConnell and the White House and Jake Sullivan, who he talks to on the phone all the time, we are angry and people have had it. We don't want $60 billion to go to Ukraine because as we slept last night, Tucker, we just went $40 billion more into debt. And that's because the interest on our debt is so huge and our debt.
So this is where it gets a little disingenuous. And again, it's like, who fucking cares about the debt? But I want to show you one more thing before we close this out, because she is on the right path here. And I killed the sound on this again. But this piece of data for everyone to look at, because this right here is can't have nice things. People are like, why can't we have nice things? This is why. Why are we doing this? This is such a scam on every level since World War II. This is why everything is crumbling around us, because all of our money is going to shit like this. And so left or right, it's the battle now is not Marjorie Taylor Greene and, the insurgent Republicans versus the establishment Republicans, or, the left versus the Democratic Party, because the left is really on board with this at this point. The real battle is people that want a better country here versus people that are cool with this continuing on the path that it's been continuing on forever. And in fact, inflating even further, because it's like, look, I'm not even against the idea of American hegemony. And I've said that before, I wasn't against it until I realized how insanely corrupt our government and system is. But the reality is we could do a lot more through soft power and covert stuff with a surgical intensity to maintain power than we do with these money laundering scams
and these just dumping billions and billions of dollars. So you get the point there. That chart is something that I went back to quite a few times. And the last thing I want to show you in this episode, real quick, is Drea DiMatteo talking about Neil Young. And I think this is actually really good. Check this out. So as her name in the show is escaping me. But watch this clip of her from Dr. Drew, because she actually just based like I never in a million years, very intelligent woman, and just I was very impressed by this. So check this out. A lot of people missed it.
Take the vaccine.
I lost everything because I held out. I consumed information as much as I could about what was going on. It didn't sit right with me. I felt like the whole thing was just all very suspect. I was
Your
scared.
Hollywood jobs and your
But this is
TV
interesting.
and
Well, in the
movies
lockdown,
and-
though, in the lockdown, I really was like, hold on.
Something's
How
wrong.
are they managing to close down the entire world?
Right.
You know,
Wow. That is so attractive. Like, even aside from like she's a very attractive person, but like just the mental acuity to and the skepticism, because so many people are so stupid on this issue, it's attractive.
that it's just all at the very top, and it was all
I also definitely have a thing for like the New York accent, that like East Coast, like tough chick thing. So sue me.
weaponized, and none of it even was about medical integrity. I don't think anything was about any kind of integrity. There was an agenda. It's insane. I've never been political. I've never,
Yeah, I really
I
haven't
didn't even
either.
like actors who would talk about politics. The only person I would ever put up with their politics, some musicians, but, would be like Neil Young, who I adored for years. He was my favorite. I framed pictures of him all over my house. I have to sell them.
And now
So fucking based. So based. I love that so much. I have to sell them. I had framed pictures of him all over my house. I have to sell them. Oh my God. Fuck Neil Young. Seriously. That to me, the whole thing about this, and I talked about it when it happened. You can go back and look at my old videos. I started on Rumble. I forget this. When I started doing this show, it's good to me that I have more of a viewing base on Rumble now, because I started doing the show on Rumble. And then I branched out into YouTube a little bit, and then the censorship stuff started happening. YouTube has honestly been a lot better lately, as you can tell. They're actually playing views that might not jive with the mainstream narrative, which didn't happen for a long time, but it seems like they're getting a little bit less restrictive, knock on wood. But anyway, that aside, I went down this whole path about what she was talking, what we were talking about, and then I lost my train of thought. So the point is, this woman is based, and the Neil Young thing, my bad. I had to jog my own memory there. So with Neil Young, at the time that I did that segment, it seemed like a commercial for Amazon Music. It literally was like, he's like, I'm going to pull all my stuff off Spotify because Joe Rogan's spreading disinformation. And then he's like, by the way, it's on Amazon Music. Everyone go buy Amazon Music. It was so disingenuous. And so this take, I have to sell all my pictures of Neil Young, is absolutely one of the best I've heard on the situation. Thank you. So that was April of 2024. Drea DiMatteo on her Neil Young U-turn. We're still in April here. This next episode we're going to dive into is from April 27th of 2024. And it starts with something that, seems like a distant memory already. And that is the college protests. Do you remember that? The college protests back in April. I mean, I think they started in the spring, really. But let's get into it. So I'm going to start you out here with my just kind of little piece on this. And let's talk about it. Then they came for defund the police, and I did not speak out because we need police. Then they came for Stop Cop City, and I did not speak out because I was a liberal. So let's take a look at what's going on right now on college campuses in the freedom-loving United States.
Sit on the ground. I said, dog. Don't rap it, dog. Oh my God. Come here, some cops. Oh my God! You be more fascist! You are Hitler! You are a laughing dog! Shame on you! May you never live another day! I am a professor! This is an Emory professor, everyone! I am a professor of economics! You're rabid dogs! You're
So you see a lot of people on the right cheering this boot to the throat type mentality. And you'll see me on Twitter in the comments posting pictures of a guy licking a boot and just going, "This is you." So this is where we're at with college protests right now. And just to kind of add some flame to this fire, here's another one. That was from, I believe, NYU. This is from University of Texas. The camera guy. Just a guy.
Holy shit! Move back, 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 move back.
This is the out of control, obvious reasons. Yes, Glenn, because they want to make them seem anti-Semitic. One of the accounts I follow that I get probably the most information from about these types of protests is Jewish Voice for Peace. And, I follow people like Do Dissidents and Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, who are also Jewish. So, a lot of the best commentary on this are Jewish people. So, it's just the anti-Semitic thing, anti-Semitism thing loses a lot of its edge when you kind of just scratch the surface just a little bit,
So there's where we were back in April with these college protests about a certain event that's happening in the Middle East. I'll leave that there. There's a lot more footage. You can go back and watch it. It's episode 55 on April 27th. And the other great clip I have from this is a TikToker explaining the construction of the Uniparty. And I'm going to just jump up to that for you because this is worth watching again. Even though this guy does go down a little bit of a rabbit hole that I disagree with, I think overall he has this pretty much, he has the American political system pretty much nailed down. So check this out.
TikTok, but watch this. This is fantastic. And let's talk about it.
I hope you'll let me explain, because as we navigate the tricky intersectional ethics of the upcoming 2024 election and beyond, it's important that we begin to understand this in our bones. 50 years ago, the U.S. had two political parties, Republicans and Democrats, and both had genuine public support, and both platforms held some public appeal. And then the right wing realized that there was unimaginable money to be made from corporate campaign funding. So they abandoned their entire platform and dedicated themselves completely to allowing the exploitation of the environment and the working class to give every single penny to the ultra-rich.
That was the beginning of the Reagan era. I don't know if you know that. My mind has been blown on the Nixon thing. We'll get into that on a whole other level. Tucker talked about it on Joe Rogan, but Reagan was the beginning of the puppet era, really, I think. The true beginning.
Really well, but there was no way they were going to win elections with that as a platform because it amounted to a giant middle finger to the working class and their voter base. So they needed to mobilize a new voter base. They looked at a few options and settled on evangelical fundamentalist Christians who were previously pretty apolitical. In order to buy their votes, the Republican Party turned on a dime in the 1980s and became rabidly pro-life. Before this, the Republicans were openly pro-choice because abortion is a personal right, and they were the party advocating personal rights. This marked the start of the modern culture wars, where the right invents boogeymen to terrify their base into ignoring the fact that their entire platform is basically steal all your money and give it to the rich, while destroying the environment we live in. The Democrats quickly followed
They called that trickle-down economics. I don't know if you remember that, or Reaganomics.
suit, starting with Clinton. They also abandoned any actual representation of their base for corporate cash grabs, including massively lucrative arms deals and warmongering in order to funnel billions through the Pentagon into their corporate funders' pockets. So the only two major political parties in the most powerful country in the history of the world, both completely sold out to corporate interests some 30 to 40 years ago, which has led to an ever-widening gap between public opinion and legislation. For example, polling shows that some 70% of Americans have wanted some form of universal health care for decades, but it's barred from even being seriously discussed.
So just so you know, too, this guy is on TikTok. His handle is @WatchfulCoyote. So I'll just keep this up while he does this incredible
Citizens of
breakdown.
the U.S. are shockingly aligned on most major issues. We all want the rich to pay taxes, not to watch our neighbors and families die from easily preventable medical issues, living wages, fair elections, breathable air, and not bombing of babies. Corporations want the exact opposite, or more accurately, they want the record-breaking profits they can extract from the opposite. This creates a real quandary for both Republicans and Democrats alike. How do you continue to get votes while aggressively working against everything your voters want? You already know the answer. They stage a farce where they pretend to be bitter enemies, and like any abuser, they both claim that they are the only ones who can keep you safe from the other. The Republicans pretend that they are the only thing preventing straight white Christians from being hunted for sport by hordes of black and brown trans drug dealers screaming pronouns and making up
There
new
it
genders.
is.
The Democrats pretend that they are the only ones who can save you from the coal-guzzling fascists literally storming the Capitol.
So this is the one thing I think he gets a little bit wrong, but I'll let it slide.
The fact that one boogeyman is totally fictional and the other is very real doesn't change.
Yeah, one is totally fictional and the other is. There are elements of truth to both of those boogeymen, but they are largely overplayed for the sake of dividing us. And it makes me a little sad that he buys the insurrectionist narrative, but whatever.
Change their tactical exploitation and the presentation of themselves as your only hope at all. And they've gotten really good at this dance. They do a great job at it now. They look genuinely enraged at each other as they denounce the other side of the aisle, while all of them vote unanimously for the same tax cuts for the rich and blow.
You know what, though? I will Watchful Coyote. If you happen to see this, my friend, his name is Jack, I guess. Look at my pinned tweet because I think it'll change your mind on the boogeyman thing.
Military budgets and genocides that line their funders' pockets. The Republicans have it easy. Their platform of culture war has no relationship to their corporate funders. So when they get into office, they can do most of what they say they will. They'll criminalize abortion, defund social services, cut taxes, but only on the rich, never for you, institute a brutal police state, terrorize immigrants and LGBTQ people. The Democrats have a real problem, though. Their nominal platform is at odds with their corporate sponsors. So they do the only logical thing from that position. They intentionally lose.
Yes. Yes. This is the exact reason you constantly see the we don't know. We had complete control of all three branches of government in the Obama era, and we just couldn't pass good policy because the Republicans, those darn Republicans.
Every time they make a catch, win an election, they intentionally fumble the ball. We're all so used to seeing this farcical dance that we can't even really register it anymore, but the Democrats have had the Senate, House, and presidency simultaneously multiple times in the last few decades. At any one of those times, they could have actually made change. They could have codified Roe versus Wade. They could have passed legislation eliminating all student debt. They could have cut military spending, taxed the rich, passed universal health care. They could have capped emissions and maintained a livable environment. Our country and world could be very, very different than it is. It really doesn't have to be like this. But if they did those things, they would then gain massive public support and actually run the country, but they
really doesn't have to be like this. It really doesn't have to be like this.
Would lose all their corporate funding. So that's not actually what they want. So they keep this incredibly fragile balance, where since the Clinton years, where the Democrats sold out, the balance of power has been carefully maintained at almost exactly 50-50, giving both parties the ability to point the finger and blame the other for not getting anything done.
Nailing it.
It didn't used to be like that. The party that better represented the will of the population used to just win and then do what the people wanted. Like the 75th Congress, some 90 years ago, was 344 to 88. Because the Democrats, who held the 344, maintained a 95% tax on the rich and actually subsidized social services and education. If today's Democrats simply adopted the platform of their own party from 90 years ago, they would win every election in a landslide, but they actively don't want to win. For many of us millennials, this was really driven home by the 2016 election cycle. Polls were crystal clear. In every single poll, Bernie Sanders beat Trump by double digits and Hillary Clinton lost to Trump.
We all saw this too. I know a lot of my peers in online are from the Bernie movement because I was a volunteer for Sanders, not because of anything other than I wanted healthcare for my fellow man. I've seen too many people become sick from it, but I love that this guy gets this because over the years we've kind of just slowly forgotten about all this.
The DNC pulled out all the stops. They lied, cheated, stole so much in order to force Sanders out and put Clinton up as the candidate that it was impossible not to see it. It looked insane to many of us. We felt crazy. I remember
Yes. Okay, Willie, I wanted to highlight this comment, Willie, because I was just thinking about this and I was going to make this point when this guy's done, but I'm going to make it now. This is why there are massive college protests. Just vote, get out and vote. It is so fucking clear that that does absolutely nothing. The only thing that actually changes the dynamic is real grassroots protest. We saw it with the civil rights movement. We saw it with women's rights. We've seen it with gay rights. Eventually, the mainstream comes around to the grassroots, just like with news.
So I'm going to stop right here. You get the idea. This guy pretty much nails it on the current two-party uniparty system that we have. But I noticed that I skipped an episode, so I'm going to go back now. That was from 55. I'm going to actually go back to episode 54 and just touch on this one little bit. I had another piece about Vivek and isolationism and how that's the new bad word to call people if they want like to spend money here in the US. But we'll skip that because we're already way over time here. I mean, not way over. I'll go another hour. I don't care. I'm going to get through this. This is only part one, too. Part two of the 2024 recap will be the second half of the year. This is all the way up to July. So anyway, this is a bit about how American companies are so disingenuous about the Ukraine war that they kept Russian oil flowing even after the invasion. So check this out. This is actually pretty good.
I think November. Let me look at the date. It's kind of small. Oh, July 18th of 2023. And the headline of this is, remember, Putin invaded in February? Major U.S. firms supplied equipment to keep Russian oil flowing after Ukraine invasion. And let's read about those firms and who they are, shall we? All right. So, major American providers of oil field services, that's a very niche market, supplied Russia with millions of dollars in equipment for months after its invasion of Ukraine, helping to sustain a critical part of its economy, even as Western nations launched sanctions aimed at starving the Russian war effort. The largest, SLB, formerly Schlumberger, maintained and even slightly grew its business after others eventually departed. It announced on Friday it would stop exporting equipment there as the Associated Press prepared to push a report on the company's Russian operations. So the McCarthyism hadn't quite hit them yet. But let's read on. There's going to be a surprise guest in this article. I'm sure you're going to be excited. Russia imported more than 5,500 items worth more than 200 million from top 5 U.S. firms in the sector, led by SLB, Baker Hughes, and Halliburton. Ooh, when you see this kind of news, it makes you wonder if Dick Cheney is really genuine. Dick and Liz Cheney are really genuine when they call Donald Trump the worst threat to democracy our country has ever seen, doesn't it? You know, when you know they have a vested interest in this war, when their company is making some cash off of it, it just really, I don't know. Maybe it's me, but I kind of question their motives of becoming so anti-Trump and in the way that they are. So let's finish this. In the following year that the invasion began in February 20th, that's according to customs data obtained by B4 Ukraine and vetted by the AP. The technology helped keep some of the world's most challenging oil fields operating in a sector that provided nearly half of Russia's federal revenues in 2021. Baker Hughes and Halliburton wound down their Russian operations several months after the invasion, but until last week, SLB still sold technology there. And I didn't really look into that company. So there you go. American companies making money, but off the Ukraine or off Russia post-Ukraine invasion. And that is going to bring us out of April and into May. And what do we have for May here? So the first thing we're going to talk about in May is a piece I did about how the college protests were funded by George Soros, because that was a very common talking point among right-wingers at the time. And I thoroughly debunked that talking point. And so I'm going to try to, this is kind of a long piece, but I'm going to try to jump around a little bit for you so you don't have to watch the whole thing.
But let's just start it right here. And let me get that up for you. Foundations attached to some of the largest names in Democratic circles. That is the actual headline right there, because that makes it way more distant. The headline makes it seem like George Soros is funding the protests, but the subheadline is like, there are Democratic donors attached to organizations, which when you're a donor and you're one of these organizations, you get funding from all kinds of places and you do all kinds of different things. So these fucking donors, these guys who just throw money at stuff like Bill Gates, for example, a lot of times I don't think they know the details of what they're doing. But I think this article has a different purpose than it seems, and I'll explain that in a minute. So here's the first. Here, let me get this big for you so you can read along if you want. President Joe Biden has been dogged for months by pro-Palestinian protesters calling him Genocide Joe, but some of the groups behind the demonstrations receive financial backing from philanthropists pushing hard for his re-election. Okay, no lies detected there. The donors include some of the biggest names in Democratic circles: Gates, Soros, Rockefeller, and Pritzker, according to a Politico analysis. Now, all my conservative friends have been puppeting the whole like, oh, Soros is funding the protests. Soros controls everything I don't like. It's deeper than that, guys. Unfortunately for you, it's a lot more nuanced than Soros controls everything. So 2 of the main organizers behind protests at Columbia University and on other campuses are Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now. Both are supported by the Tides Foundation, which is seeded by Democratic mega donor George Soros. So Soros doesn't support either of these organizations directly. He supports the Tides Foundation, which gave them money at some point. Now, conservatives will be like, oh, Soros is giving money to the people standing at colleges with Palestinian flags. No, that is not happening. As you can see, it's much more complicated than that. He gave money to an organization that gave money to an organization that's involved in the protests. Jewish Voice for Peace didn't even organize the protests. Glenn Greenwald talked to college students who actually organized the protests. Now, Jewish Voice for Peace supports the protests, but I'm going to explain to you in just a minute the motive of this article because it's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, to keep going, both are supported by the Tides Foundation, which is seeded by Democratic mega donor George Soros and numerous Democratic campaigns, including $6,600 to the Biden Victory Fund a few months ago and more than $300,000 during the 2020 in check to say, hey, look, guys. So let me give you my take on, before we go any further, let me give you my take on what this article is. This article is designed to get funding pulled from these organizations. And as we continue to read it, you'll see that. But as I read this, I'm like, okay, these guys are clearly making trumped up accusations against, the Tides Foundation and all these, just to put their donors in check to say, hey, look, guys, you're funding anti-Semitism. So I guarantee you that what's going to happen is the Pritzker people and Gates and Soros and all these people will go, oh, stop giving money to Jewish Voice for Peace, and If Not Now. That's the purpose of this artitle. Not so there you go. That's the Soros funded protests headline has a much deeper, kind of info well when you go into it, talking about, hey, like I said in the clip, they are totally trying to demonize giving money to these organizations that are, funding third-party organizations that are kind of helping the protests. So the last thing in this episode I want to speak to, and this is from May 5th of 2024. This is episode 56. We talk about the Biden administration. What they do is they come out and say, oh, we're going to do something. And then they get a bunch of like good press around it, but then they don't actually follow through on it. And one of those things was marijuana legalization. And a lot of people I know were very excited about this. And so I want you to see some of this conversation about this. So check this out. Here we go. Go into the weeds, pun intended, on this article from the New York Times, because as usual, as with our first piece,
the headline buries the actual truth of what's happening. The headline, you got to stop reading headlines because they are always misleading. And the press actually does still sometimes, provide some good information, I guess, even though it's seen through the lens of the people I just showed you in that room most of the time. So this is an article from the New York Times. And the headline reads, Justice Department recommends easing restrictions on marijuana. So when I saw this, my first thought was, oh, hey, college kids protesting genocide. Look what we're going to do for you. Now will you vote for Biden? But let's really dig into this and go into the dirty, nitty-gritty details. The move kicks off a lengthy rule-making process. That's a red flag, and could amount to a major change in federal policy. That's optimistic. So the article is by these three people, Eileen Sullivan, Glenn Thrush, and Zolan Kano-Youngs, was published April 30th. So let's read it real quick. I'll try to get through it quick because there's a lot to take in here. The Justice Department said on Tuesday it had recommended easing restrictions on marijuana in what could amount to a major change in federal policy, even though the move, which kicks off a lengthy rulemaking process, does not end the criminalization of the drug. Let's read that again. Even though the move, which kicks off a lengthy rulemaking process, does not end the criminalization of the drug, it is a significant shift in how the government views safety and use of marijuana for medical purposes. It also reflects the Biden administration's effort to liberalize marijuana policy in a way that puts it more in line with the public, as increasingly more Americans favor legalizing the drug. So what that paragraph says to me is, how can established moneyed interests control this? We're going to try to get it. We're going to slowly let this work its way through Congress so that all these lobbies can get their hands in it. And we can create regulations. That's what they're doing. Let's keep going. People familiar with the recommendation, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said Attorney General Merrick Garland planned to tell the White House Office of Management and Budget that the government should change the drugs categorization. After the office assesses the recommendation, it will still face a long road before taking effect, including being subject to public comment. Public comment being senators and lobbies getting their hands in it. The Associated Press earlier reported the Justice Department decision. So this is also a telling line because basically it doesn't really mean anything yet, because all it says here is Garland planned to tell the White House Office of Management and Budget that the government should change the drugs category thing. Public comment means to keep going. Administration such a change. He has for years said that designating marijuana on the same level as heroin or LSD made little sense because he works for the police lobby. He hinted during his State of the Union address in March that the change could have the most immediate impact on the cannabis industry itself. That is a clutch line right there. That should be the headline. Don't you think? Or at least the subheadline. Imagine this headline: Biden administration's decision will do to decriminalize marijuana. This is the headline. Envision this. Accurate headlines in the New York Times. Biden administration's decision to decriminalize marijuana will have little effect on anyone but the cannabis industry. That would be the headline. Let me say that again. Biden administration decision to decriminalize marijuana will have little effect on anyone but the cannabis industry. That would be the correct headline for this article, if it were honest. A lot of people are going to be disappointed.
Here's my take on the Biden administration's marijuana legalization move, which, as we've seen, did not materialize into anything at all. So another thing I was correct about, but let's jump forward to episode 57, which was on May 26th, I believe. Let me check the date on this. Sorry, May 16th. May 16th. So the first thing I want to show you from this particular episode was a piece I did about fake influencers in the Democratic Party. So let's jump into this. I think you're going to like it. And yeah, this is mainly about the Biden administration kind of moving on TikTok influencers and debriefed by the DNC or something. Hey, like you can be a little more edgy, you know, pretend like you're. But I mean, I can almost guarantee, even though right now he's advocating for third party, something is going to happen. Something will come to the fold, or the reality is, like I said earlier, the Democrats really do want commentators. And watch this, because this guy, I had no idea about this guy, but I follow this guy.
Hold on, let me get a close-up for everybody. What does everybody see wrong with this picture? Who is that right there? I'm sure we're all very well aware of who Pearl Mania is, right? He wouldn't give us biased news, would he? Or who V from Under the Desk News is, right? They definitely wouldn't give us biased news.
So that Pearl Mania guy, I actually follow him on TikTok, and I had no idea he was one of these types of people because he seems pretty edgy. Like a lot of his takes are pretty edgy. Like he's pretty, you know, on the mark with a lot of stuff.
Would they? Yeah, I'm sure it's no coincidence that they were seen together at the White House, but just wait. What are you doing? What are you doing in this picture with the selfie with this motherfucking piece of shit?
So the other side of this, because I got this from social media, this could be a Photoshop. This could be bullshit. You know, I mean, I don't even know if this actually happened. I'm pretty sure it probably did. You know, I don't think anyone would have a reason to just create this conspiracy theory. Maybe they would. But I'm just putting that out there. This could be completely fake. But based on historical precedent and the things I've seen in the past, they have done this kind of stuff. So it's not hard to believe there's, you know, doing it on a regular basis.
Oh, but wait, there's more. What do you see wrong with this picture? Here, let's get a close-up. What do you see wrong with this picture? Oh, there's good old Harry, who's known for spewing bullshit-ass propaganda on this app. Oh, and here's another one of Pro Mania being so proud about being at the White House, right? But what if I told you this gets much deeper than you'd like to think? For example, right here, this article paints it very well. Here's a statistic for you. A third of people ages 18 to 29 prefer to get their news supposedly from TikTok and other social media. So the White House is supposedly working on new ways to get its message out to those audiences.
That line is important.
And more than 20 people were there with ring lights and audio equipment taking it all in. And it's supposedly part of a White House strategy to reach younger people where they are, which often is supposedly scrolling on a device with help from influencers. Influencers such as V from Under the Desk News, who says to be at the people's house having lemonade, waiting for the president to speak is a very exciting moment. As you can see, like it says here, that's V, host of Under the Desk News, which provides minute-long daily news wraps to 2.7 million TikTok followers. Oh, and there was supposedly a special briefing for V and other content creators ahead of the ceremony. I wonder what was discussed in that special briefing. Honestly,
There you
people can't
go.
realize
a
that
bunch
there's
of
two
TikTok influencers proved to be complete fakes, controlled White House ops. That's from May of 2024. There's another piece in here about RFK Jr. being an anti-Semite I wanted to touch on for a minute. Let's play a little bit of that. We won't go too far on this one because I'm trying to keep these short. This segment out. Let me go back to what something he said
One
earlier.
trap I think they fall into where it's like,
you know, Israel is guilty of genocide, which clearly it is not. In Israel, there were in 19 Israeli prime minister of corruption and put him in jail for 7 years. And that, you know, Israel is guilty of genocide.
He had a good tweet, and that's why the media is clearly, I don't know, I thought that was interesting. I don't think I have a question there, but
no, it was a good point.
And if you block students from going to class, if you block Jewish students from going to class, if you're occupying buildings, if you're trespassing, the university has a right to to discipline you. The rights are very different if you're on a side, and it's continuing. And those countries are also committing.
So basically,
right.
I lost the piece.
To
I should have cut this
criticize
up
the
better.
government of Israel without.
But he's
vicious form of anti-Semitism. Kennedy, you're well
I
educated.
could almost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we respectfully requested that you rescind Mr. Kennedy's invitation to appear here due to his repeated and very recent statements that spread dangerous anti-Semitic and anti-Asian conspiracy theories and attempted to move into executive session because House rules prohibit public testimony that degrades or defames people. His reckless rhetoric helped fuel anti-Semitic incidents, which for the record are at the highest level in the United States since 1970. They have nearly
Yes.
tripled in the last 6 years. Since you gave Mr. Kennedy a megaphone today, I
Where
want to
does
give him a
that
chance to
stat come
correct his
from?
statements and prepare some of the harm that he's helped cause.
I could almost,
Mr. Kennedy, you're well
I
educated.
could almost bet
So yes or no, please. Are you
that
aware
stat
that for
comes from
centuries
the ADL.
Jews have been scapegoated and blamed for causing illnesses like Black Plague and more recently COVID?
I am. Those are known as blood libel, and they are one of the worst and most disturbing parts of human history.
Good. I'm glad to know that. Of course, that you acknowledge that. Of course, it's true and well documented that this pernicious form of anti-Semitism led to centuries of discrimination, even horrific pogroms and massacres, and it still fuels deadly violence today. Yet last week, you floated a baseless conspiracy theory that the coronavirus was bioengineered to target Caucasians and Black people.
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
Bizarre, unproven
He's a racist.
claim echoes that same historic slander of labeling Jews and Chinese people as a race, and that Jews, and in this case Chinese people, somehow managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You do see that, yes or no?
You're misstating.
No.
You are.
I quoted what you said earlier, and it is directly what you said. So just ask.
So I just wanted to show you those two clips just juxtaposed in this piece, which was basically RFK Jr. caping for Israel, and then earlier in the year, or it might have even been the year before, when the Democrats were trying to smear him as an anti-Semite. So I think in the case of people like RFK Jr. and Trump, the point of me showing that was I kind of give them a little bit of a pass for being pro-Israel, because it's almost like they have to play that game or they're going to be tarred and feathered as vicious anti-Semites, who hate Jewish people and are, for the end of America. So we're going to move on to this next piece. And this is going to be from episode 58. So episode 58 aired on May 25th. And I'm going to skip. I had a piece about Jasmine Crockett, but you all know her now, and it's kind of long. So I'm going to jump up here to this bit with Aaron Mate and Judge Napolitano. And this is around the time, now this is in May of 2024. This is around the time you started to see kind of some crossover between left and right voices because of the Gaza thing. And this is why I think that I highlighted this at the time, because I was very happy to see, honest voices from different sides of the political spectrum coming together to do good things. And so this is the start of that right here. And let me just share this with you, and we will talk about it a little bit. Unity across political cult lines. One of my favorite shows of the last couple of years, and I mean, I've played several clips from it, of course, but has been Judge Napolitano's show. And I think it's so sweet and cute to see like the friendship that he's developed with Max and Aaron and Anya. And he totally crushing on Anya. You can see it. And he even made some oft comment to Max in one of their interviews about, he's like, oh, the beautiful Anya like gave me a kiss. I hope that didn't upset you. And Max is like, well, it didn't happen long enough for me to intervene or something like that. Anyway, this starts with a very cool thing, which I think is like the beginning of a new anti-war coalition, and it's so fucking beautiful. Watch this.
The book party for our dear mutual friend Anya Parampil, at which you and her husband Max Blumenthal and she spoke to a wonderful, wonderful crowd. I was hiding in the back of the crowd until it was over, and then I jumped up on stage to hug and kiss you guys. It was there you go. There's the beautiful Anya and the handsome Max and the stately Aaron and the old Judge.
It was a great surprise, Judge, and thank you so much for making it out. Your support means a lot.
Well, it was terrific, and it was a great, great audience. Young, seriously pro-peace people hugging and kissing this ex-Fox guy something from 5 or 10 years ago, I couldn't have imagined. It was deeply, deeply moving for me as I left that group.
Deeply, deeply moving for me. You love to see that, man. Like that's the one silver lining to all the fucking terror that's happening in the world right now. And again, like, so I'm just gonna cut that right there. Beautiful moment. The end of this episode also featured a data point that I love to share because I think it was a great moment for America at large. And here's that.
That is the first time that's ever happened in this country. A new study from 2022 shows that the estimated 17.7 million Americans who say they use cannabis daily or near daily is 3 million more than those who drink every day. And another study out just yesterday shows there's an 11 times higher risk of developing a psychotic disorder like schizophrenia, anxiety, and depression for teenagers who have used cannabis within the last year. Joining me now, global health policy expert and
So I think that's interesting for a couple reasons. First of all, congratulations, my fellow stoners. We're winning. If you've ever been a drinker, though, and I have, it hurts. It especially when you get older, it fucks your body up. Cannabis does not. Cannabis is a much better recreational drug than alcohol is. Of course, I do also want to add that stat about the mental thing that they throw with teens. They have to throw that in there to pretend like they're, unbiased or whatever, but also for their advertisers in the alcohol and pharmaceutical industries. There's a lot of money behind alcohol. There's a lot of money behind cannabis now, in a business sense. And I think that's one of the reasons there's such a huge push to decriminalize it, because it's a massive industry, of course. But now, of course, they're going to scaremonger like, oh, it's going to hurt teens. Listen, pretty much everyone I grew up with smoked pot on a regular basis in their teens, and we're all fine. I'm not saying that it's okay for kids to smoke pot in their teens or that you should encourage it. I'm not encouraging it. I think that not daily. I mean, I think it's better than pretty much anything else to experiment with as a kid. But they're going to try to fearmonger a little bit about it. But this guy actually speaks a lot of sense. So listen to what he has to say.
MSNBC medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta. Good to see you. Doctor, the ship has sailed. Cannabis is legal in 23 states and D.C., I think 38 in D.C. with medical marijuana.
I love that. The ship has sailed.
But big picture, what should folks know? And
So
what
I'm
don't
going
we
to
know
stop
about
right there
daily
because,
use?
again, you get the basic crux of the point here. We don't need to deal with all the sloppy, messy details here. So we're going to now move into June. And in June, we're going to start with the Trump verdict. And there was, of course, mountains and mountains of propaganda around this. And I just want to go back and show you how bad it was, even on kind of like a low key, like local news station, some of the stuff that the kind of propaganda stuff that they ran back in this era. So check this out. This episode is from June 1st of 2024. So here we go into June right here with the Trump verdict. Enjoy. Local reporting on this, just so we can kind of see what people are saying at a local level. So this is from an Idaho news station. As
a convicted felon on July 11th. But major point, he is still legally allowed to continue his campaign for president.
So the station, I believe, is hold on a second. Let me find that. It's KTVB, and it's based in Idaho. And yeah, just listen. They have this guy from Idaho, Boise State, basically, who's supposedly a political expert. And let's just break it down.
This afternoon, we're joined virtually by Boise State political science professor Dr. Charlie Hunt to talk about the verdict and the impact it'll have on the 2024 election.
Now, right off the bat, I feel bad for this guy because his name is Charlie Hunt. So if you were to initialize his name, it would be C Hunt, which kind of sounds like chunt. Or if you make the H silent, another word.
Dr. Hunt, this is clearly a historic decision. He is now the first former president to be a convicted felon.
So completely irrelevant, but I went to high school with a kid whose name was Mike Hunt, and he changed his name to Terry because people made fun of him because his name was Mike Hunt. So
I'm curious, how do you believe this changes the political landscape, or does it change it?
I'm not sure whether it changes it or not, Joe. It's really too early to say, partly because of how unprecedented this is. We've never had a president convicted of a felony before.
So I think this is interesting because if you notice, the media tone on this is, oh my God, this is unprecedented. We've never had a president convicted of a felony. What does that mean? Does that mean that no presidents have ever committed felonies? Of course not. It just means none have ever been convicted of them before. So whether or not you believe Trump is guilty or whether you like or dislike Trump, that's the reality of this situation. I mean, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney committed multiple crimes that are well documented, and neither of them has ever been convicted or probably ever will be.
I believe Ulysses Grant was the only one convicted of a misdemeanor for driving his carriage too fast. But we know up to this point that anywhere from...
I love that too. The only other president who's been convicted of a felony was driving his carriage too fast. Isn't that quaint and adorable?
10% to a third of Trump voters have said in polls that they would reconsider doing so if he were convicted of a felony.
So for me personally, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm just going to be honest. This conviction, more than anything, would be a factor in me voting for Trump. I think based on this conviction alone, I would consider voting for Trump now. And simply because of how hard they are going to keep him out of there. I mean, 35
was a single day record. We saw similar kinds of reactions after his mugshot came out in the Georgia case last year. And so, for his diehard supporters, this is just kind of more proof that he's being persecuted, that as one of the
yeah, I mean, to anyone with any common sense, it's proof that he's being persecuted. Because if this were really equal application of the law, there are so many criminals that have been president that should be prosecuted immediately. So there's that.
Voters we saw said he's done nothing wrong. But Donald Trump's problem is that those types of supporters alone are not enough to win him this election. There are a lot of Americans out there who may not love Joe Biden, but are not comfortable voting for Donald Trump yet. And this is just such uncharted territory that it's really tough to say at this point whether that's going to sort of push voters one way or the other.
At least he's
now we have the
somewhat
answers
honest,
to that question. And this is, of course, was back when Biden was still in the race. So I'm going to jump up now to another story on here on this episode it's episode 59 from June 1st. This is about the judge who prosecuted Trump and his conflicts of interest in the case. So I want to just show you some of this. We won't stay on this for too long.
Raised $93 million off the case. So this is just talking about the money that her clients made off this case. This is the daughter of the judge, by the way, who refused to recuse himself. All they asked was for a different judge in the case, and this guy would not recuse himself. But let's keep going. So here, two major Democratic clients of the judge overseeing Donald Trump's hush money trial have raised at least $93 million in campaign donations and used the case as their solicitation emails, raising renewed concerns that the jurist has a major conflict of interest. Trump's attorneys are considering filing another motion demanding Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan recuse himself from the trial set to begin April 15th. We all know how that went, sources said. The judge's daughter, Lauren Merchan, is president of Authentic Campaigns, a Chicago-based progressive political consulting firm whose top clients include Representative Adam Schiff, who is the lead prosecutor in Trump's first impeachment trial, and the Senate Majority PAC, a major party fundraiser. Authentic Campaigns, and thus the judge's daughter, is actively making money from this sham attack against President Trump, rendering Judge Merchan conflicted out, Trump spokesman Stephen Chung told the Post. Booker for senator. let Daniels and Karen McDougal. He has denied having affairs with both women. If convicted, he faces up to 4 years in prison. Now, this is where it gets even better, and this blew me away. Authentic Campaigns, and this is from Open Secrets. This is the judge's daughter who just prosecuted Trump. This is her marketing agency, political marketing agency, and these are some of her clients. This is just the first page. There's way more than this. But just look at this. This is like number 1, Schiff for Congress. Number 2, John Tester, Montanans for Tester. Number 3, Tammy Baldwin for Senate. Number 4, Senate Majority PAC, which is a Democratic PAC. Number 5, Cory Booker for Senator. These are all people that are paying the judge's daughter right now. Or this is, I mean, look, this is from the 2024 election cycle. All of these Democratic superstars gave this money to the judge's daughter who just convicted Trump. That's a massive, massive conflict of interest. And not a lot of people.
I'll go a little deeper on that, but we're going to stop there and move on. The next clip I wanted to show you from this episode, which was June 1st of 2024, episode number 59, is Trump on Tim Pool. And this is one of those things that, I think got real overlooked in the election cycle, some of the stuff that he said in this interview. But let me just jump up to some of the better parts of it. Let's see if this might be the best.
There's 2 components to this. The first is many of the libertarians here, we want to see firings. We want to see in the bureaucracy corrupt individuals, the bloat. On top of that, without getting into the specifics for obvious reasons, the things that they're doing to you with the court system is not just to you. It is to me. It is to everyone who voted for you in 2020.
It's true.
Are we going to get some good personnel in as Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and in the CIA, and see some prosecutions?
So we had some great people because our trade numbers were fantastic. The jobs we did on trade, the jobs we did, frankly, in the military underneath the terrible television generals who were absolutely terrible, but we have incredible people. We defeated ISIS, and we had no new wars because they were concerned with us. I had no wars at all. I finished off a war that we were in for 20 years.
So you can argue that Trump's administration did some stuff while he was president that was aggressive. Like the whole thing in Venezuela obviously was a fucking catastrophe and something that his administration pushed. And I'm sure he was behind on some level. But you have to admit that even this rhetoric, the fact that this rhetoric is like mainstream in today's Republican Party, I had no new wars, and that's something to be proud of, is definitely a step in the right direction. Because once he's president, if he's making this claim, then you can really hold him accountable and go, hey, you said no new wars, bro. Like that's when a lot of people are going to hate me if Trump gets reelected, because I'm going to flip to criticizing who's in charge. I'm going to flip to criticizing Trump. Right now, the people in power are doing completely terrible things. So they're the ones who have the ire of anyone who's honest. But once that baton changes hands, it's going to flip if you're honest. So,
but we had no wars, and we have to get the right people. It's all about the people. So when I first came here, I was only in Washington 17 times in my life. All of a sudden, I'm president, and I really knew nobody. I relied on people. Some were good, some were rhinos, some gave us some bad advice, and
so that right there could explain what I just told, like with the Guaido Venezuela thing. I mean, that Guaido thing very much seems like a John Bolton move. And Trump hired John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, I'm sure by the recommendation of the party or something. Once the thing is, and Steve Bannon said this too, like once they got in, they kind of they were the populist insurgents in the Republican Party, and they won, unlike Bernie Sanders, who was stomped by the Democrats. And so once they got in, they had to kind of build a coalition with the establishment Republicans. And I think at the end of the day, that really hurt them, Extra bullet.
All right. So let's stop there. There was a clip in there where Trump says we didn't want any more wars and stuff. I might have passed it, but I think the thing he says right there about I'd only been in Washington 17 times before that,
That's interesting. And it doesn't seem like an arbitrary number. It's a very specific number. So I think I'm going to try to close out in the next 15 minutes here. We're going to jump to episode 60 now in our recap. And this is from June 8th of 2024. And in this one, we got a couple of clips to discuss. The first one is, I gave Jon Stewart a lot of crap for being terrible when he first came back on the scene. But in this episode, I gave Jon Stewart a little bit of credit because he actually came with some truth on Tom Segura's podcast. So I'm going to show you that right now. That's going to be, and this is from, again, episode 60, which aired on June 8th of 2024. So check this out. This is actually pretty good stuff right here. Let's just watch. And
in the way of, it is a protest for the status quo being so unsatisfactory for people. It's the kind of thing that, like, I remember this was 15 years ago, somewhere along the line, 20 years ago, there was a poll done. Everybody made a big deal of it. Who is the most trusted newsman or newscaster in America? And it was Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings and Brian Williams and Diane Sawyer and Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart won running away.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to explain to people, like, I could have been dildo wrapped in gold and that would have won, because what people are expressing in that poll is, I'm dissatisfied with the status quo and the establishment delivery of this service. They have lost my trust.
God damn it. He just fucking nailed it. Like, when you watch what he's been doing on The Daily Show, and even Bill Maher, all the guys like Jon Stewart and Bill Maher, it feels like they don't get what he just said about the status quo. But Jon Stewart just eloquently put into words exactly what's going on with Trump. People, like, I don't like Trump per se. I don't think he's any different than a lot of the fucking rich cunts in fucking politics. But he's something different. And that's what I think, that was the epiphany for me when I asked my working class friends, like, hey, what, like, Trump is a fucking rich guy who shits on a golden toilet. Why do you like him? And they're like, he's not a Bush or a Clinton. So clearly Jon Stewart gets that. And he just told you that he does. So let's keep watching.
And so people in my area, I'm sure Maher gets it. Tucker Carlson gets it. Like, all the people in the space of giving opinions about the day's event. I mean, that's honestly, how did Trump become president?
Well, I was about to say,
same shit.
It's the same analysis, right? Because everybody who goes, how the fuck is this guy president? Or, how is he getting this support? What most people you would hear, they're like, he's not like these other guys. He's not from that political landscape where they say the right thing. And like, he was just this wild guy who was saying,
he is not a member of the anointed political class. We just talked about how, voting in America is like choosing between two pre-selected candidates that the donors are fine with. And I think Trump probably fits into that realm anyway. But the fact that there's such an enormous pushback by the status quo against him is why people like him.
Things. And then that was exciting to people. It was exciting that somebody was.
And the wilder it would get.
Yeah.
Everybody kept saying, well, he's certainly, now that he said that.
Over. Yeah.
And everybody's like, he's going up in I think what ended up happening there is, it was like an antibiotic resistant strain of something. And so people kept saying, well, certainly if we hit it with strep and if we hit it with erythromycin and penicillin, it would have to die.
Sure.
And then it was just like,
nope.
Not even close.
It's too strong.
Too strong.
It's way too
just
strong.
Keeps going.
And I think too, it's, it seems like everything is being done to not have this guy, on ballots and
everything other than just have a better idea.
Holy shit. See what I'm saying? Holy shit. This is what they were making fun of Carville for on Jimmy Dore the other day. Hey, we're throwing everything at these guys and nothing's working except having a better option or like actually saying, hey, we're going to fucking do something for voters. And again, Jon Stewart right here proving he knows this shit. I haven't watched The Daily Show recently. So there you go. There's Jon Stewart actually getting it on Tom Segura's podcast, despite his reporting that I just showed you from earlier in the year. And so there's a couple other good things in this I want to touch on real quick before we log off for today's 3-hour show. And the first one is this Patriot Front guy on PBD, because this guy is, I've said it so many times, and just to show you again, guys like this are brought into the public dialogue to make it seem like rational views are racist. So he talks a lot about an anti-war stand. The guy says a lot of stupid stuff prior to this, but I think I nailed it in my commentary on this before. And so let me just show you this real quick before we cut off for the day. So check this out. This is the point that I want to show you. Viewpoints from this guy. Now, here's an area, and this is again why I think people like this are an op. This is an area that I think a lot of people on the left will agree with this guy. And again, this is why I keep saying this, and I'm going to say it again. I think these people are put in the public sphere to make anyone think people who agree with these viewpoints is a fucking racist. And listen to this and you'll understand why I feel that way.
You don't think America exists to ensure these places. So, yes. Got it. So for you, whether they destroy Jerusalem or not, that's not in your top 100 list that matter to you.
I would say that I would think it would be a very bad thing. However,
you wouldn't lose sleep over it, though.
The United States, if we're talking about what we would do, I'm not in any position to write policy or dictate foreign policy, right? But the United States could act not as a arms dealer, but it could act in a more assertive tone as a peace broker. And I think that could...
That's racist. See what I'm saying? That right there is why this guy's put in the public
avoid the type of cataclysmic scenario you're talking about.
What prompted...
Because that's correct. He has the correct viewpoint here.
You to be so uncomfortable or maybe against Israel's existence, or the fact that's like, I think Trump being too supportive of that, I'm not with that. What prompted you at this age, 25 years old, to be so against that?
It's not...
This guy's 25 years old.
Not so much Israel in the Middle East as much as it is Israel in the United States. I think the amount of people of Jewish faith and ancestry, and specifically of Zionist political leanings, is they're overrepresented in positions of power in the United States today. And is that me saying that every single one of them is morally bad and guilty of some particular wrongdoing? No, absolutely not. But I think it is not wrong to say that these people, especially Zionists, people with these lobbying groups, are so vastly overrepresented in comparison to the amount of Jews in the Middle East or in the United States or anywhere, that we need to ask some serious questions as a country as to whether or not the influence of these, political careerists is in the best or the negative interests of the United States. And if you ask me, I would say no.
I think that's a very...
And that right there, again, these people like that, he's right about that. He's totally right. And I think a lot of people on the left will agree with him. A lot of people on the right will agree with him, but he's correct about that. And again, his other views are completely disgusting and wrong. And I would not support any of his views on that. But this is something that people can kind of find common ground on. The fact that, hey, if you really care about our country, the United States, where we live, where we are, you would want to rethink some of this stuff. And you might have to work with people who have disgusting viewpoints like this guy to make that happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think people would dispute that. I don't think that's the concern. There's a lot of people that are probably going to be on the same page with you there on
there
whether
you go.
America's first or not. It's not about I hope so. I think that's what the case is. Because we would want it to be America first. And some of them are simply not. They're giving too much money to Ukraine, too much money to a lot of different places. Those are all valid concerns to have. I think for you, okay, so at the beginning.
So this is another point here that just blew my... All right, so
let's stop right there on that piece. You get the idea on why these Patriot Front guys are in the mix. And I want to close out here today by just showing you kind of a clip that I think sums up everything in our political debate today. And it's a clip of James Baldwin. And I think he just sums up the way that I feel about, you know, political dialogue in the world in general right here. And so I'm going to jump up to this and we're just going to watch it. I'm going to try to cut out my commentary for the most part because I want to focus on what James says, and then I'll have some closing remarks before we go. But check this out. This is actually really good stuff. James Baldwin talking about how what we see in the streets affects us. And Baldwin is one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. And I really feel this way. I think this is where we lost our way. And he just summarizes this so well.
In despair about the world.
I never have been in despair about the world. I'm enraged.
Enraged, all right.
But I don't think I'm in despair. I can't afford despair. I can't tell my nephew, my niece. You can't tell the children there's no hope.
I suppose I'm wondering whether we're more materialistic, more selfish.
I don't know more.
No.
I think that we're more panic-stricken. I think that I walk through these cities, the cities of the Western world, London, New York, and sometimes it resembles the most poverty-stricken cities of the East. There's been a breakdown, a betrayal of the social contract in Western life. And people are grabbing for things and holding on to what they think they can get and stepping all over their neighbors because they are panic-stricken.
What, comforting themselves with material things? Are
Yes,
you
but
saying
when
it's
people,
simple?
yes, when people do that, they are reacting to something is beginning to crack. People hoard all this because they don't have anything else, but they don't really believe in it, and they kill to get it. That proves the moral bankruptcy, which translates itself into the actual bankruptcy of the world in which we live. We have yet to understand that if I am starving, you are in danger.
Mm.
People think that my danger makes them safe. They're in trouble.
Are you?
So there you go. Profound. James
that's the way-
Baldwin, one of the great thinkers of our time, just laying it all out. And we're going to stop there. That's episode 60. So we're a little more than halfway through the recap of the year. And maybe I'll bring some other stuff next time. I think I got a little bit sidetracked this year by YouTube kind of suspended me for a while and it took the wind out of my sails a little bit. But what I'm going to do in the new year after I'm done with this 2024 recap is really double down on this show and try to be a little more frequent and consistent with my commentary because it's something that I really enjoy doing. And I appreciate all you that jump on and watch. Every last one of you. I love the comments, whether they're calling me a jackass or agreeing with me. I love that engagement. So keep it up. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I love y'all. I hope you have a happy new year. I hope you had a great Christmas. And with that, I think we're going to close out for the day. Thanks for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Rogue Grimes, and we will see you, if not next week, maybe before then. Take care.